Chapter 779. After that, everyone was divided into two teams. Gudatsi, Matthew, Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hyuga Hassan, Tranquil Hassan, Arash, and Kudo Taichi were in one team. Wuming, Bedivere, and Gazril were in the other team. Tang Sanzang, on the other hand, stayed behind in West Village because he did not have any combat strength. Although I can't help, I will pray to Buddha to protect you, Tang Sanzang said as he prayed for everyone. Thank you. We will definitely return successfully, Master Sanzang. Gudatsi was rather confident. We're ready. Assassin, you can begin, Gudatsi said to Wuming. Nodding, Wuming was not in a hurry to open the teleportation gate. Instead, he shouted into the void. Azril. Yes, Master. The green-haired girl appeared out of thin air. Miss Azril? Matthew was surprised. After all, Matthew and the others had not seen Azril since their first meeting. Actually, Azril has been hiding by Tachika's side under my orders to protect Tachika. After Azril appeared, Wuming began his explanation, explaining why Gudatsi and the others had not seen Azril except for their first meeting. I see. That person who was covering for us at the entrance of the mountain was also Azril, right? Gudatsi widened her eyes, looking as if she had seen through everything. Indeed, it was me, Meow, Azril replied playfully with a hint of cuteness, but Gudatsi and the others, who had seen Azril before, did not find it funny. Gudatsi and the others had seen Gazril's aura, and Gudatsi vaguely remembered that when she first met Azril, Azril had addressed her as the commander of the Skywings. The aura of Azril, who was not the commander, was already very powerful. Gudatsi did not even dare to imagine how terrifying Azril, who was the commander of Gazril, was. However, if Wuming knew what Gudatsi was thinking, he would definitely laugh out loud. Although Azril was the commander, the strongest individual among the Skywings was still an outsider, Gazril. However, at this moment, Hassan felt that something was wrong. Hassan looked angry, his hands clenched into fists, and he stared at Azriel. Although 100 Faces Hassan was wearing a mask, the change in the atmosphere made it clear that 100 Faces Hassan was glaring at Azriel. Cursed Wrist Hassan pressed down on Cursed Wrist Hassan, hinting at 100 Looks Hassan not to be impulsive. This caused most of the people present to be dumbfounded. What was going on? Could it be that there was a grudge between them? This most of the people actually referred to the naive Gudatsi, Matthew, as well as Bedivere, Arash, Idatoda, Tang Sanzang, and a few others who had not come into contact with Azril and Hassan. Gazril looked like she was watching a good show. Her little face was flushed, and she was quite excited. This made Wuming glare at her. Whether it was Cursed Wrist Hassan, who was pressing Hassan's shoulder, Da Vinci, or even Roman in Chaldea's control room, they all basically understood what Hassan was angry about. Wuming sighed helplessly. Although this had nothing to do with him directly, it was indirectly related. The reason for Hassan's anger was smoky drunk Hassan's death. Azril had always been with Gudatsi and the others, so as long as Azril appeared, smoky drunk Hassan would not have to sacrifice himself. Of course, it was also wrong to resent others for not lending a helping hand as an excuse. Hassan was a smart person. He knew that if Azril were to save him, no one else would be able to say anything about it. It was normal for Azril not to help because this was her duty. There was no rule that stated that she had to help when she saw injustice. In addition, Azril was Wuming's subordinate, so Hassan chose to remain silent. This disappointed Azril, who had noticed from the beginning that someone was hostile to her. She had hoped that the monkey would attack her, and then she could fight back openly. The Skywing species were not angels, but a species that sent others to meet angels. Therefore, it was a pity for Azriel that they couldn't fight. In the corner, quiet Hassan put his hands on his chest and heaved a sigh of relief. Although she didn't know what had happened between Hassan and Azril, she didn't want to cause internal strife. On one side was her compatriot, and on the other side was the subordinate of someone who was not afraid of her poison. It could be said that Quiet Hassan was the last person who wanted to see Hassan and Azrael get into a conflict. "That's great, Servillo." Looking at Wu Ming's back, Quiet Hassan prayed silently. Wu Ming did not pay attention to Quiet Hassan. When he saw Hassan loosening his clenched fist, Wu Ming knew that this matter was not going to get out of hand. It was not that Wu Ming was gloating. It was quite unfavorable for them to have internal strife so close to the final battle. "In short, I will let Azrael go with you. Azrael, it's the end, so don't be stingy with your magic power. Just do it." 100 Faces Hassan did not pursue the matter, and Wu Ming would not mention it again. It was better to just turn the page. "Yes, master." Azrael bowed slightly and accepted Wu Ming's words. "Then, let's go." Seeing that the atmosphere had inexplicably returned to normal, Gudatsi did not try to find out what had happened, as long as everyone was fine. "Then, let's begin." Wu Ming finished and snapped his fingers. The portal instantly appeared in front of Gudatsi. The black-purple ripples were like a black hole, spinning as if to suck Gudatsi in. "Why do I feel a little scared?" Gudatsi smiled awkwardly at Wu Ming. "It's not the first time you've experienced my portal. What are you afraid of?" Wu Ming smiled helplessly. "Let's go, senpai, I will protect you." Matthew conveyed his faith to Gudatsi through his firm eyes, which made Gudatsi not afraid. "With Matthew around, it really makes people feel very at ease." Gudatsi hugged Matthew and rubbed against him. Matthew's face became rosy, but he did not refuse Gudatsi's closeness. What a beautiful sisterly relationship! Most of the people present thought so in their hearts. However, Wu Ming only felt that Tachibana's power was great. Then, Gudatsi and Matthew entered Wu Ming's black-purple portal side by side. He was followed by Cursed Wrist Hassan, 100 Faces Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan. The last ones were Arash and Kota Saito. "Then, master, I'll go first," Meow, Azrael said and jumped into the portal. "Then, it's our turn next." Wu Ming looked at Bedivere and Jillian. Chapter 780. You go first, Bedivere. Wu Ming snapped his fingers and opened another portal. "Then, Servillo, I'll wait for you first." Bedivere nodded to Wu Ming, waved his robe, and went into the portal that Wu Ming opened. "Then I'll be the second, master." Giliel smiled and flew into the second teleportation portal. Finally, Wu Ming looked at the last person besides himself, Xuanzang Sanzang. "Master Sanzang, take care of yourself here. You guys need to take care of yourselves. I just need to stay here, and you guys are going into the lion's den. It really makes this poor monk feel guilty." Tang Sanzang looked embarrassed. "No one is perfect, and the same is true for servants. I feel very lucky that Master Sanzang can pray for us," Wu Ming said. "Well then, Wizard Sanzang, take care." After Wu Ming finished speaking, he went into the portal as well. However, the portal that Wu Ming entered seemed to be, hey, you chose the wrong portal. However, the portal was still closed, leaving Tang Sanzang howling there alone. Forget it. Anyway, this portal's ability is his. He should come back if he notices that something is wrong. Tang Sanzang sighed. Walking to the window, Tang Sanzang looked at the blue sky, lowered his head, and prayed. Amitabha indeed, Wu Ming entered the first portal last, which meant that the portal that Wu Ming entered was the Sun King's side. However, that was not because Wu Ming chose the wrong portal, but because Wu Ming had deliberately chosen it, because Wu Ming had already started a war with the other side in the Holy City. Skywing species surrounded the gate of the Holy City, arranged in 3 rows in the sky, and the magic power in their hands was constantly surging. Wu Ming floated behind the 3 rows of skywing species, looking down with his hands crossed in front of his chest. Whoosh! The first row of skywing species launched a ball of magic power at the gate of the Holy City like a cannonball, causing a big explosion. Boom! Immediately afterward, the skywing species in the first row immediately floated up and retreated to the back of the third row. They began to reorganize themselves and became the new third row. As for the second row, they took a step forward and replaced the first row as they launched their attack. Because they were charging up while the original first row was attacking, the damage dealt by the new first row was particularly obvious. Boom! As for the new first row, after releasing their attacks, they floated up to the current third row, which was behind the original first row, and began to repair themselves. The original third row had now become the first row. Because they had begun accumulating power when the first row released their attacks, they were now able to directly launch their attack. The power of their attacks was still not bad compared to the first row. Boom! Immediately after, this row retreated to the last row and began to reorganize. The original first row became the first row once again, and because they began to accumulate power when the first row launched their attacks, they could also directly release their attacks now. In this way, the 3 rows of skywing species repeatedly attacked the holy city below without stopping. That's right. This was the simplest 3-section formation. Through the alternation of the 3 rows, they could instantly release attacks that couldn't be released instantly without stopping. Moreover, it was a highly concentrated attack. However, because the ordinary skywing species were berserker, it could be said that they couldn't even use such an ordinary formation. All of this was actually under the command of Wuming. With the contract as a link, Wuming had no problem giving some tasks to the skywing species as their master. Wuming was now rather helpless about the skywing species becoming berserkers. It was quite disadvantageous for a social creature to become berserkers because the advantage of social creatures was cooperation. One couldn't expect a group of berserkers to cooperate with each other. Fortunately, the skywing species still obeyed their master's orders as servants, so Wuming had no problem commanding the skywing species in battle. The 3-section formation kept firing, and with the skywing species in the air, the people of the holy city couldn't show their faces at all. This made things difficult for the gatekeeper, Gawain. Damn it! Is the enemy's magic infinite? Gawain, who was leading a group of solemn knights to hide behind the holy city's gates, was depressed. Although Gawain's combat strength had increased 3-fold under the sun, he wouldn't foolishly charge into the sea of cannons and take the damage. What if he died? What should he do? However, it turned out that the enemy's magic wasn't infinite. The magic cannons outside stopped. It couldn't be helped. If this continued, the 3 rows of skywing species would run out of magic power and leave. However, Wuming still had several thousand skywing species behind him, so he wasn't afraid of the enemy at all. However, Wuming could tell from the skywing species cannons that the holy city wouldn't be blown up so easily. Pure magic cannons wouldn't work at all. Thus, after the 3 rows of skywing species in front of Wuming stopped attacking, Wuming didn't continue sending the skywing species behind him to attack. With a snap of his fingers, a dark purple portal opened, and the 3 rows of skywing species in front of Wuming flew in an orderly fashion. The other side of the portal was inside Abinth's body. Although the skywing species had descended as servants, and their magic power was exhausted or killed, it wouldn't affect their main body. Wuming still didn't want anything to happen to them. If he had the ability to protect his subordinates, why wouldn't he do it? Wuming had a wicked taste, but it was also divided into different aspects. The 3 rows of skywing species all entered the portal, and suddenly, a portal appeared beside Wuming. Bedivere walked out with an expression that said, "The wind is blowing and the water is freezing." Then, he began to fall. This gave Bedivere a fright. Why was the exit in the air? Wuming immediately used his mind power to pick up the falling Bedivere. Sir Villo, this is... Bedivere was a little confused. Why was he, who had left first, slower than Wuming? And why was it in the air? However, before Wu Ming could answer, there was movement from the portal again. Oh! The second person to come out of the portal was Gopral. Is everyone here? Has it already started? Looking at the many sisters behind her, Gopral was a little confused. But because she could fly, Gopral didn't fall from the sky like Bedivere. Master, aren't you behind me? Gopral had the same question. Seeing that there was no movement from the holy city, Wuming looked at Bedivere and Gopral. Don't worry, one question at a time. Then, Gopral beat him to it. Me first, me first. Question, why are there two masters? Chapter 781. Because the one talking to you in West Village just now was my clone, Wuming answered truthfully. Clone? Both Jillian and Bedivere were taken aback, and then they were shocked. As expected of Lord Villo. I didn't realize that it was a clone at all. That clone gave me the feeling that it was Lord Villo's main body. Bedivere had a "you're amazing" expression. It not only highlighted Wuming's strength, but it also didn't look exaggerated. It was just right. It was nothing to have an outstanding expression. Wuming had seen many people like this, but those guys were all acting. As for Bedivere, Wuming knew very well that this guy's expression was his true expression. This made Wuming feel rather uncomfortable. That's one of the gods' authority I obtained in the other world. A perfect clone. Except for the extremely special ability that can't be replicated, the clone is exactly the same as the main body. This authority was naturally Wuming's 12 clones dependent incarnation. However, the dependent incarnation had already been used by Wuming when he summoned the Skywing species, so why could he continue to use it? This was thanks to the Dragon Seed incarnation. The Dragon Seed incarnation mainly gave Wuming the ability to dragonize, but Wuming was a dragon himself, so this ability was slightly useless. However, there were no useless abilities, only poor users. Wuming had long discovered that the Dragon Seed incarnation could give the user an extremely strong physique. Whether it was physical fitness or magic power, they were all unprecedentedly improved. It was especially effective when combined with Giant Incarnation, Phoenix Incarnation, and other avatars. Therefore, Wuming wondered if the Dragon Seed incarnation could be used to strengthen other avatars. After Wuming experimented, he found that this idea could be done. Because of Tristan's appearance in West Village, Wuming already had doubts about Ramses II. After sending Tristan off, Wuming was not in a hurry to go back. Instead, he studied how to strengthen the Dragon Seed incarnation to other incarnations to see what effect it would have. Wuming decided to strengthen the Dragon Seed incarnation on his dependent incarnation, which allowed Wuming's dependent incarnation to revive. Because it was a degraded version of the avatar ability, each avatar could not use it again after using it once. This was the reason why the dependent avatars could not use it again. However, the unexpected surprise of the Dragon Seed incarnation had resurrected the dependent incarnation. Although the Dragon Seed incarnation could not be used, it was not a big deal. Although it was cruel to say that, the Dragon Seed was not very useful to Wuming. After that, Wuming's doppelganger returned to West Village and discussed with Gudatsi and the others. As for Wuming himself, he directly went to Holy City and launched an attack on it. In any case, no matter how the doppelganger was grouped with Gudatsi, Wuming would definitely be among the people who came to Holy City. Therefore, Wuming came ahead of time. Moreover, Wuming and the doppelganger were still connected. Although they could not share images, they could at least exchange information. In addition, the doppelganger and the main body were the same person. Wuming was not worried that the doppelganger would mess things up. I see. That's why I felt that the doppelganger master was a little illusory. Gopral completely understood what was going on. Instead, it was Silent Wonder who looked at Gopral in surprise. Even his own mother would not be able to tell, yet Gopral, a mere skywing species, was actually able to see the clues? Could it be that the vitality incarnation ability in Gopril's body made Gopril and Wuming's dependent incarnation have a little mutual encouragement? Wuming felt that this should be the case. Sir Villo, have you already started a war with Holy City? Although Bedivere didn't see the 3 rows of skywings, the careful Bedivere saw that the main gate of the Holy City, the surrounding walls, and the ground were all slightly damaged. Even the radiance of the Holy City had dimmed a little. I have the advantage in numbers. Why would I fight Gawain alone? Wuming pointed at the thousands of skywings behind him and smiled. Although there were not tens of thousands of them, they still numbered in the thousands. Bedivere was a little helpless. He did not expect Sir Villo to still have such a personality. Alright, it's just a joke. Wuming shook his head. I was actually testing the strength of Holy City, and it was just as I expected. Holy City is exactly the same as Camello City. Its walls are also as thick as Camello City. Wuming spread his hands. Wuming thought of Matthew's noble phantasm, which was as indestructible as the walls of Holy City in front of him. In this case, there's really no other good way except to start from the gates. As a knight of the Round Table, Bedivere naturally understood the power of his own city walls. Wuming also tried an air raid, but it did not succeed. Just like what he saw a few days ago, a layer of light covered the sky above Holy City. It was the light film emitted by the Holy Spear, which seemed to be specially designed to defend against aerial units. The skywings could not enter at all. In that case, this gate of Good City will be broken by my noble phantasm. As Wuming spoke, he took out the meteor silver from the golden ripples in the void. Meteor silver splendor, X silver meteor, level, EX type, evil noble phantasm distance, maximum catch? This was a treasure created by the planet's suppression. The Holy Star Sword, which had truly been released from its restrictions, had the effect of determining the target as evil. As long as it had the definition of the user's enemy or someone who must be defeated, it would be marked with the evil attribute by the Holy Sword. The target of the determination was both a person and an object. Even concepts such as space and time could be included in the determination. Ever since the meteor silver had been consecrated by the suppression, after the transformation, it had gained this powerful noble phantasm. It was with this noble phantasm that the fledgling Wuming successfully defeated the other party in the battle with the Indian demigod Karna. However, it was only a narrow victory. Karna was mainly completely shrouded in the aftermath that could not spread out. To put it simply, he was affected by the aftermath. Karna, who had unleashed his most powerful attack, had lost his invincible armor, and had been affected by the aftershock of the collision between his most powerful attack and Silent's most powerful attack. How could he not be forced out of the arena? And Wuming still had armor and recovery potions at that time, so naturally, he could survive more than Karna. Back to the main point, the main effect of Wuming's noble phantasm was to determine the target of the attack as evil, and then he would launch the attack. At that time, Wuming, who was fighting Karna, had used this noble phantasm more like a light cannon than an evil judgment. That was why he had won by a narrow margin. However, Wuming was no longer immature now. He could fully unleash the true power of this sword. Chapter 782. At this moment, Wuming suddenly received news that his clone and Gadotsi had gone to an incredible place. Is it because of the great shrine's barrier that caused the teleportation to deviate? Wuming muttered to himself in an extremely soft voice. This was Wuming's oversight. When Wuming had gone to find Ramses II, Ramses II's great shrine had blocked Wuming's teleportation gate. Although it was indoors, it was very likely that Ramses II had spread the barrier to the entire Great Shrine complex, or even the surroundings of the complex. Wuming was not surprised. After all, the other party was a top-tier servant. Thus, the teleportation deviation could be said to have been caused by Wu Ming's negligence. However, with my clone around, there shouldn't be any problems. Although after entering the Atlas courtyard, the connection between the original body and the avatar had weakened a lot, even so, Wu Ming didn't think that anything would happen to Gudatsi and the others. When his clone had held Gudatsi's hand to pray to Gudatsi, he had attached a command seal to the back of Gudatsi's hand. That command seal could be considered the key to opening Wu Ming's prized artifact. The clone finally entered the teleportation gate that Gudatsi and the others had used. The moment he entered, the clone changed the destination of the teleportation gate to his prized artifact, Draconis. When an accident happened, the clone could use that switch to save the situation. Besides, Gudatsi had so many servants. While he did not dare to say that she would be able to take care of everything on her own, it would be a groundless worry if something happened. Thus, Wu Ming only needed to take care of the matter at hand. Then, I'll begin. After Wu Ming said that, the Skywings seemed to have received some sort of order and collectively retreated. Only Gopril and Bedivere, who was being controlled by Wu Ming's mental power, remained by Wu Ming's side. Closing his eyes, Wu Ming held the hilt of meteor silver with both hands and held it upright in front of his chest as he began to activate his prized artifact. The stars hidden in the world, Wu Ming's ethereal voice came out of his mouth. Next, Meteor Silver's blade began to emit a silver-white light that illuminated everything around it. Holy Sword to annihilate all evil, cracks appeared on the silver-white blade of the silver meteor sword, and an even purer golden light burst out from the cracks. Don't cover your light. When Wu Ming finished chanting this sentence, the entire blade of meteor silver instantly shattered with a crack. The golden sword of light that did not have a physical body was born from the destruction. Like a sprout that was about to grow into a towering tree, it constantly floated and grew. The completely shattered blade of meteor silver turned into silver fragments that adhered to the golden sword of light and extended along with it. Inside the holy city's gates, Gawain gulped and immediately ordered the Knights of Solemnity to retreat. He knew that this was not something that they, or even the holy city's gates, could stop. Shine! Finally, like the straw that broke the camel's back, the golden sword of light burst forth once more, a scorching and dazzling radiance illuminating the earth. Gopril and Bedivere, who were next to Wu Ming, could not help but use their hands to cover their eyes. The radiance of meteor silver was simply too dazzling. Silver meteor, meteor silver splendor. With the final prized artifact, true name liberation, Wu Ming swung it down. Whoosh! Like a surging river, the golden light swept toward the holy city's gates like a flood and slammed into them. Boom! The Skywings all closed their eyes and used their wings to cover themselves. Bedivere and Gopril could not help but retreat because of the pressure generated by this attack. Sir Villo! Bedivere forced his eyes open and looked at Wu Ming in front of him. Bedivere had never known how powerful Wu Ming was. This power can definitely save my king. Bedivere prayed, but in the end, because the radiance was too dazzling, Bedivere still closed his eyes. The radiance lasted for a few moments before quickly disappearing. The holy city's gates had already been opened. There was no sign of damage. It was as if the holy city's gates had never been there in the first place. They had completely disappeared. The gates that were defined as evil had been completely removed by the holy sword of justice. Wu Ming landed on the ground, and Bedivere and Gopril followed him down. After landing on the ground, Bedivere looked through the gates and saw the holy city's interior. The trees were neatly trimmed, and it did not reduce its beauty. The ground was all stone, without any trace of dust. Moreover, the roads were very neatly planned, and even the buildings were bright white, as if they were made of marble. Bedivere could even vaguely see a fountain through the gates. Everything was so beautiful that it was practically an ideal city. Although it was very much like Camelot, it was even more beautiful than Camelot. Bedivere had already begun to understand why people who were not pure could not enter. Letting evil people step into such a beautiful city was simply a stain on it. Of course, it might be better if one ignored the large number of solemn knights and Gawain who had begun to urgently assemble. "Are you ready, Bedivere?" Wooming asked Bedivere without turning his head as he looked at the solemn knights walking out of the gates. There was no doubt that Wooming was asking Bedivere if he was ready to rush into the holy city and face the Lion King. "Yes. Always ready, Sir Villo." Bedivere's eyes became firm as he answered Wooming with a firm tone. "Then, let's begin, everyone." At Wooming's command, the skywing species curled into a ball in the sky instantly spread their wings and swooped down collectively, beginning the battle with the solemn knights. On the other side, at Godotzi's place, time jumped forward. A black-purple ripple appeared somewhere in the desert, and then a girl with orange hair and a girl with a shield appeared from it. These two were naturally Godotzi and Matthew. Desert? Godotzi was stunned. Although the Sun King was indeed in the desert, it was impossible for there to be any buildings around. Sir Villo said that he would teleport us to the vicinity of the Sun King's great temple, but I can't see any temples around. Matthew was also quite helpless. Could it be that we came to the wrong place? Before Godotzi and Matthew could discuss what was going on, there was movement in the portal again. The big sister with the face of Mona Lisa appeared. Did we come to the wrong place? Da Vinci noticed the surroundings as soon as he arrived. "Doctor, are you there?" Godotzi asked her bracelet. However, no one responded to Godotzi. "It seems that the desert barrier should have cut off Chaldea's communication again," Matthew said. Although they were prepared for not being able to contact Chaldea, Godotzi and the others still hoped to be able to contact him. "What should we do now?" Chapter 783. The portal should be two-way. "Senior, let's hurry back through the portal," Matthew suggested. However, the sound of Hassan and Arash landing on the ground gave Matthew a negative answer. After everyone arrived, the teleportation portal closed instantly. This made Matthew, who proposed the idea of returning now, quite embarrassed, and it also made Hassan and Arash quite embarrassed. They all heard what Matthew said, but since things had come to this point, they could only bite the bullet. Hassan, who jumped out of the portal, landed on one knee. Maintaining the posture of kneeling on one knee, cursed wrist Hassan, like Godotzi and Matthew, was full of doubts about the scene in front of him. Did we come to the wrong place? Although he did hear Matthew's words, cursed wrist Hassan did not know why Matthew wanted to go back through the portal. But now, cursed wrist Hassan almost understood. We should have come to the wrong place. 100 Faces Hassan stood up, took 2 steps, and looked around. Quiet Hassan nodded slightly as if he knew her name. As the only archer, Arash made full use of the function of her telescope. The surrounding is a flat desert, there are no sand dunes, and there are no traces of any buildings, Arash said. What do we do now? Arash looked at Godotzi. Without Wooming, Godotzi, as the master, was their leader. Anyway, the portal has been closed. Let's explore the surroundings and see which direction is the Sun King's territory. Immediately afterward, Godotzi looked at Da Vinci. Only Da Vinci was a caster, and this time they had to rely on caster. It's useless to look at me. I have no problem figuring out the direction in the desert, but if you want to ask me where are we now, it's really difficult. Sure enough, even the genius Da Vinci can't do anything about this. Matthew was a little disappointed. Mr. Hassan, can you tell where we are? Godotzi looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan, as well as his companions, 100 Faces Hassan and Tranquil Hassan. Although our Hassan is not afraid of the sandstorm in the desert, if we didn't come here ourselves, we wouldn't know where we are in the desert now. Cursed Wrist Hassan shook his head and gave Gudatsi a disappointed answer. Then what should we do? Gudatsi had a "we're done for" look on her face. I've discovered something interesting. Da Vinci suddenly spoke. Although Da Vinci was unable to complete Gudatsi's request, Da Vinci was still capable of simply exploring the surroundings. What did you discover, Da Vinci's lover? Gudatsi quickly walked up to Da Vinci. There's a barrier in front of us. But, Da Vinci's lover, our main task now is to crusade against the Sun King. How can finding a barrier help us at this time? Matthew was puzzled. Although that's true, Matthew, if there's a building with a barrier in the desert, if it doesn't belong to the Sun King, then there must be a big secret. After all, the Sun King had moved all the buildings together to form his temple complex. Now that we have no clue, there's no harm in taking a look. Maybe we can find out where we are now. With that, Da Vinci took the lead and walked over. Hey, wait for us, Da Vinci's lover. Gudatsi pulled Matthew and quickly caught up. Meanwhile, the three Hassans and Arash looked at each other. What should we do? Cursed Wrist Hassan asked quietly. Follow me. 100 Faces Hassan finished speaking, and with a handsome swing, he followed Gudatsi. Quiet Wrist Hassan followed closely behind 100 Faces Hassan. Indeed, as Ms. Da Vinci said, we can only take one step at a time. Arash smiled and said something to Cursed Wrist Hassan, then quickly followed. I didn't say I wouldn't follow, I just wanted to ask. Scratching his head, Cursed Wrist Hassan, who was left alone, also followed. Wuming's clone in the Dragon Lair space saw the situation outside through the special command seal on the back of Gudatsi's hand. The clone was also very sorry about the unexpected teleportation deviation. However, he was quite interested in the barrier and buried building that Da Vinci mentioned. If it's not Ramses II's building, what could it be? The clone pondered. Everything is normal on the main body's side, and I don't have to rush to attack Ramses II. Let's see what Tachika and the others can find. There was something the clone did not say. He had a hunch that the Sun King was the final enemy. On the Holy City's side, the Skywings and the Solemn Knights were fighting. As soon as they came, the Skywings condensed energy weapons and began a melee battle with the Solemn Knights. It could not be helped. Although using magic for long-range bombardment was also very good, the Skywings still liked to fight in melee. Even if the Skywings had lost their minds, they could still beat the Solemn Knights into retreat. It should not be forgotten that the Skywings appeared in the world as servants. Even Berserker was a servant, and it was not an existence that the Solemn Knights could fight against. The Solemn Knights generally relied on numbers to swarm the servants, but this time, their trick was not effective. Although they couldn't count, maybe the number of enemy servants was more than the number of Solemn Knight. However, because the Skywings were all melee fighters, the Solemn Knights could rely on numbers to replace the other party. However, in the current situation, 10 Solemn Knights for one Skywing was quite extravagant and basically impossible. Basically, it would take 100 Solemn Knights to replace one Skywing. It was a good thing that the Skywings were servants, or else Wuming would not have let them fight like this. Let alone 100 Solemn Knights, even if there were thousands or tens of thousands of them to replace one Skywing, Wuming would still feel the pinch. Putting aside the fact that the Skywings were his subordinates, they were still young girls. How could they compare to these smelly old men? Putting aside the joke, even if it was 100 Solemn Knights for one Skywing, the defeat of the Solemn Knights was clearly visible. If not for the fact that there was no order from above, Gawain might have already ordered the Solemn Knights to retreat. That was because if this continued, the Solemn Knights of the Holy City would all be dead. However, even if they were all dead, they could not retreat. When Wuming had used the noble artifact to blow up the gate, he had ordered the Solemn Knights to retreat to avoid unnecessary casualties. Now, however, they had to defend the main gate. For the king. With that thought in mind, Gawain swung his sword and killed a skywing that was attacking him. The skywing turned into magic power and disappeared from Gawain's side. Hold on! The holy city must be defended. Chapter 784. Wooming and Bedivere stood at the back of the fighting army and watched. Gilliel could no longer bear the excitement and had run to the battlefield to fight. The reason Wooming did not go up to fight was very simple. His ultimate goal was never to fight, but to charge into the holy city. There was simply no point in fighting. Fighting was a reward for the skywing breeds, so Wooming gave this reward to the skywing breeds who enjoyed fighting. Wooming glanced at the eager Bedivere and said, What's wrong, Bedivere? Do you want to fight too? No, Sir Villo. I just feel that we shouldn't be idling here. Bedivere silently shook his head. Bedivere was a knight of noble character, after all. Seeing his own people charge into the fray while he enjoyed the safety in the rear was something he could not bear. You don't need to think too much, Bedivere. The skywing breeds are god-killing weapons. Fighting is what they like to do. Wooming then pointed at the skywing breeds closest to Bedivere and said, Look. Bedivere looked over and saw that the skywing breeds in the midst of fighting was smiling. Not only that, but the skywing breeds around her were also smiling. It was clearly a berserker, but they were smiling. It was impossible to say that they were not happy, and this was a joy that came from their very bones. That's why having the skywings fight is actually a reward for them. Besides, as Wooming said this, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Gawain, who was constantly killing the skywing breeds. We still have an even more important mission. The skywing breeds were truly very powerful, and the solemn knights could only kill 1 out of 100 of them, but that was only for the solemn knights. To Gawain, who had the knightless blessing, the skywing breeds that enjoyed fighting were not frightening. No matter how powerful a beast was, it was still a beast. Hunters always had a way to deal with beasts. Just like now. The skywing breeds attacking Gawain swung their scythes at him, but Gawain dodged to the side. Due to inertia, the skywing's scythe landed heavily on the ground. But because of this momentary inertia, Gawain's solar holy sword cut off the skywing's head. The headless skywing seed shook twice, turned into pure magic power, and disappeared. The lack of rationality was the greatest weakness of the skywing species, while having rationality was Gawain's greatest advantage. Gawain was already annoyed by the constant bombardment from the skywing lifeforms. Now that the skywing lifeforms had stopped their bombardment and switched to close combat, Gawain was naturally happy to oblige. Although the solemn knight was retreating, it was still better than not daring to go out and fight with the enemy. Previously, he would have died in vain if he went out. Now, at least he could take a few enemies with him. Of course, even if they wanted to defend, there was no way to do so. The holy city's gate was gone, and there was no way to defend. After Gawain killed quite a few skywing species, the surrounding skywing species realized the threat he posed. The skywing species had indeed gone berserk due to their berserker class, but their instincts were still there. Just as the instincts of wild beasts told them that beast hunters were dangerous, the instincts of the skywing species told them that this golden-haired monkey wielding a white longsword and wearing white armor was very dangerous. Several skywing species swarmed forward, attempting to tear apart this threatening monkey from all directions. However, it was clear that this golden-haired monkey was not afraid of attacks coming from all directions. In fact, it was perfect for dealing with enemies coming from all directions. Excalibur Gallatin! Gawain instantly released the solar holy sword, which turned into a scorching sun and sent the skywing species that got close to Gawain flying. Because they were deep in the battlefield and the solemn knight was still around, Gawain's noble phantasm did not do much, only using the lowest level of noble phantasm release. Thus, the skywing species that were attacking Gawain were sent flying instead of being vaporized by the heat. However, even the lowest level of noble phantasm release was still quite scorching for the skywing species that were close to Gawain. These skywing species that were sent flying turned into magic particles in the next second and left the battlefield. Gawain waved his solar holy sword and was quite satisfied. At this rate, the main gate won't fail. However, reality told Gawain that he could not casually raise flags. Silver. The half-released noble phantasm instantly slashed at Gawain. As expected of Gawain, he immediately placed the solar holy sword in front of him. Clang! The dazzling white meteor silver clashed with Gawain's solar holy sword, producing an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing. Because meteor silver was in a half-release state, Gawain could not help but half-kneel after receiving the attack. Bang! This was the sound of Gawain's knee hitting the ground. Gawain stood up and spread out meteor silver, panting as he looked ahead. Sir Villo, since when have you become a sneak attacker? I don't want to hear you say that, Gawain. Wooming waved his sword and removed the meteor silver's noble phantasm from its half-released state. This is a battlefield. Do you think I'll yell, "I'm going to attack you" before attacking you? Don't make me laugh. However, Wooming still laughed, but it was a mocking laugh. Gawain naturally understood what Wooming meant. Or rather, how could he not understand? There was no such thing as a sneak attack on a battlefield where danger lurked everywhere. From the moment you stepped into the battlefield, it meant that you agreed to be attacked at any time and place. That's my fault. However, Gawain did not have the slightest fault. Instead, he assumed an attacking stance. It couldn't be helped. The Holy City had already given the order that Wooming was an enemy. As a knight who completely obeyed the king, Wooming was Gawain's enemy. You go in first, Wooming suddenly said. Of course, this was not said to Gawain, but to Bedivere, who was walking behind Wooming. Sir Bedivere? Gawain was stunned, but he soon understood. Back then, Chaldea's master claimed to be the messenger of this new force, and Bedivere had escaped with Chaldea's people. Therefore, Bedivere was naturally one of them. It was not strange that he would appear at this juncture. The holy city's gate is open. You go in first, I'll be right behind you, Wooming repeated. Yes, Sir Villo. Bedivere obeyed Wooming's words and immediately ran towards the holy city's gate from the other side. Wait! Gawain would not let Bedivere enter even if it was him. However, Wooming directly rushed forward and swung meteor silver down heavily again. Bang! Another clash of swords. Give up, Gawain. With me here, you won't be able to stop Bedivere. Pressing down on Gawain with his sword, Wooming said while looking into Gawain's eyes at such a close distance. Gawain's frown deepened. Chapter 785. As a comrade who had served King Arthur for many years, Gawain understood Wooming very well, just as Wooming understood Gawain very well. Similarly, Gawain also understood how terrifying Wooming was. He had a mysterious background, an ageless face, and mysterious runic magic. Even in the Knights of the Round Table, Wooming's martial prowess was one of the best. Unlike Gawain's wide-open swordsmanship, Wooming's swordsmanship was both wide-open and agile. This was all thanks to the teachings of Wooming's master and sister, Ska. Wooming and Gawain exchanged blows. Sometimes their sacred swords would clash, creating sparks. Sometimes they would dodge, creating dangerous situations. Sometimes they would attack and defend quickly, their swords dancing in the air. In the end, they would occasionally kill a few Knights of Solemnity and Skywings. Of course, it was Wooming who killed the Knights of Solemnity and Gawain who killed the Skywings. Although it was only a few exchanges, if an expert was present, they would realize that Wooming and Gawain had engaged in an extremely thrilling exchange of blows. However, because Wooming was not pursuing the pinnacle of martial arts, Wooming's martial prowess had not yet reached the level of being invincible. Furthermore, Gawain Saint's number had tripled his strength, so Wu-Ming had not immediately taken him down. However, Gawain could not do anything to Wu-Ming. As expected, "You haven't changed, Gawain." Wu-Ming and Gawain stood a few meters apart, staring at each other. Wu-Ming and Gawain had exchanged a few blows, undoubtedly to test Gawain's ability. Gawain was exactly as Wu-Ming had expected him to be. "After all, I'm already dead. How can I grow?" Gawain would not ignore Wu-Ming just because he was an enemy. "But even so, Sir Villo, you can't take me down immediately." With the protection of Nightless, Gawain was even confident that he wouldn't lose to Wu-Ming. In this way, Bedivere, who had barged into the Holy City but didn't receive any reinforcements, was no longer a concern. After all, Egwene was still in the Holy City. "So, while you stopped growing, I didn't stop growing at all." It was also because of this that Wu-Ming didn't do much research on martial art. Unlike Luo Hao in the God Slayer world, who had studied martial arts to the extreme and reached the pinnacle of martial arts, Wu-Ming was neither interested nor necessary. After all, Wu-Ming only needed the means to defeat the enemy. Wu-Ming stabbed the meteor silver into the ground and held the sword hilt with one hand. He then closed his eyes and placed his other hand on his heart as he began to chant. "I am the strongest, and I hold victory in my hands. No matter if it's a human or a demon, he's someone who will defeat all his enemies." "Not good?" Before Wu-Ming finished chanting, Gawain sensed danger. He absolutely could not allow the other party to finish reading this inexplicable sentence. That was what Gawain thought. Gawain stomped on the ground and rushed toward Wu-Ming with the solar holy sword that was beginning to heat up. However, Gawain's speed was not as fast as Wu-Ming's mouth. "I will defeat any enemy that stands in my way." The moment he finished chanting, Wu-Ming opened his eyes. His originally red eyes had now turned golden, and a golden mist began to appear around Wu-Ming's body. "Excalibur Gallatin!" Gawain instantly released his noble phantasm and attempted to use it to attack Wu-Ming. However, a large golden hand grabbed Gawain's body instantly. The golden mist around Wu-Ming began to spread and solidify, forming a golden giant with only the upper half of his body. The hand that grabbed Gawain was none other than the giant's hand. Gawain's noble phantasm exploded in the giant's palm, and the flames of the sun seeped out from the gaps between the giant's fists like fireworks. Immediately after, the giant seemed to stand up, its two legs stepping out of the ground and firmly landing on the ground. Boom! Boom! The giant landed with two loud thuds, causing the Skywings and the Knights of Solemnity to stop in their tracks. That's, how could there be an enemy like that? It was a good thing that the Skywings had gone berserk and could not speak, or else they would have been very excited. Everyone stopped what they were doing. This was not an act but a subconscious reaction. Everyone could sense the extreme danger of the golden giant, and they all stopped what they were doing. They all watched helplessly as the golden giant grabbed the sun that was still spewing flames. Then, the giant raised Gawain up high and slammed him down on the ground. The moment he hit the ground, the giant opened its palm and pressed Gawain firmly into the ground. Boom! Whoosh! A deafening sound created a visible shockwave that swept through the entire battlefield with the golden giant at its center. Aya! Wah! The Knights of Solemnity and the Skywings were all sent flying. Wu-Ming was at the golden giant's heart, looking down at Gawain, who was pressed down by the giant's palm, without the slightest bit of surprise. This was why he did not pursue martial arts to the extreme. He had a way to defeat his enemy. What is this?" Gawain clenched his teeth and asked Wu-Ming in a rather sorry state. "Killed the authority of a god. Personally, I think it's not bad," Wu-Ming casually described. Gawain could only bitterly smile. It was indeed not bad. Gawain was unable to resist at all. Gawain's flames could indeed cause damage to the golden giant, but they were not very effective. Furthermore, the golden giant was formed from dense air, and it would immediately replenish itself after being burned. Thus, Gawain had no way of dealing with the giant. Furthermore, the giant's main ability was immense strength, so Gawain was completely unable to get up while being pressed down by the golden giant. Even the solar holy sword had fallen out of his hand and was pressed to the side. "I've lost, Lord Villo," Gawain said indifferently as if he had given up. "It's good that you understand." After all, he did not have to kill him. If possible, Wuming wished to spare Gawain's life. "However, I swore an oath to my king that I would defend the city gate until the very end." However, Wuming really wanted to retort, "Your city gate was destroyed by me a long time ago." "Hold on, are you thinking of?" Wuming suddenly realized a problem. Gawain's words sounded like he was speaking from the bottom of his heart before he died, as if he wanted to drag his enemy down with him. "That's right, Lord Villo. I'm going to self-destruct." Gawain bared his white teeth, looking very proud. Then, the solar holy sword and Gawain's body began to emit a blazing light. Boom! Chapter 786. On Gadazzi's side, everyone followed Da Vinci to or accidentally fell into a mysterious clubhouse. This clubhouse, in Da Vinci's view, was simply magic workshop. Da Vinci looked at the entrance in front of him and made such a judgment. What? Da Vinci, is this the magic workshop? However, for such a large-scale workshop, there should be records of it in history. Da Vinci fell silent, because she couldn't find the information of this magic workshop from her memory. "This is Atlas Courtyard." Suddenly, a man's voice came from the shadows. "Who is it?" Cursed Wrist Hassan, 100 Faces Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan immediately took out their daggers, full of vigilance. Until the other party made a sound, Hassan didn't find a person in the shadows, which undoubtedly made Hassan lose face, but at the same time, the other party also made Hassan feel danger. Hassan alone couldn't discover this. This unknown servant was dangerous enough. "Senpai." Matthew also immediately summoned a shield and stood in front of Gadazzi. The man who made a sound in the shadows gave everyone the feeling that he was a servant after he leaked his aura. "Confirmed that the other party is a servant. Master, please be careful," Matthew reported to Gadazzi. Arash, on the other hand, was not vigilant because of this, or Arash felt that the other party was not a bad person. "Da Vinci, Gadazzi just wanted to discuss with Da Vinci, but Da Vinci suddenly shouted as if he was possessed. "Atlas Courtyard?" Da Vinci took 2 steps forward and looked at the shadows. "Is this really Atlas Courtyard? What's wrong with Da Vinci? Where is Atlas Courtyard?" Gadazzi knew nothing about it, so she looked at Matthew, who had some understanding of the magic world. "Senior, I don't know the details. I only know the name Atlas Academy. It's said to be one of the 3 major departments of the Magic Association, but it doesn't have any contact with outsiders." Matthew returned to Gadazzi based on his own understanding. "Although it's one of the departments of the Magic Association, it's the same as the imitation Scarlet Sea. It's a secret society that doesn't communicate with outsiders," Da Vinci explained. "He's also an expert in alchemy. It's said that the 7 alchemy tools sealed in Atlas Academy can destroy the world 7 times, the man in the shadow explained. Destroy the world 7 times? This gave Gadazzi a fright. Ignoring Gadazzi's shock for the time being, Da Vinci revealed another secret. It's said that the headquarters of the Academy of Atlas is located in Egypt's Atlas Mountains. It seems that it's true. After all, this is the territory of Ramses II, which is Egypt, so it's not surprising that Atlas Academy exists here, the man in the shadow said and walked out of the shadow. He was wearing a suit like an English gentleman, holding a decorative cane in one hand, and a rather old pipe in the other hand, and a detective's face. Nice to meet you, everyone from Chaldea, Hassan, and the great hero of West Asia, Mr. Arash. The man with the pipe said everyone's identity as soon as he opened his mouth. This caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Although the other party didn't completely say the name of Gudatsi, since he could say the name of Chaldea, then he should know the name. The other party should say it for brevity. I'm sorry for forgetting to introduce myself. The man with the pipe showed a rather sorry smile and then began to introduce himself. I am Sherlock Holmes, a caster servant. Nice to meet you, the last master of Chaldea, Rika Fujimaru. This time, the other party said the name of Gudatsi, but that was not the point. The point was the other party's real name, which shocked Gudatsi and the others. Sherlock Holmes. At the gate of the Holy City. The big explosion caused by Gawain's self-explosion swept almost half of the battlefield. It could only be said that he deserved to be called the Sun Knight. His self-explosion was like a burning sun. It completely turned into a red fireball burning on the flat ground in front of the Holy City. However, this sun explosion only lasted for a short while, and soon the fireball disappeared, and the explosion stopped. However, the entire battlefield was destroyed. Because the Holy City was protected by the city walls, other than the street without the city gate that had turned black and melted, the walls of the Holy City were just like bricks that had been severely burned by the flames. There was basically no major problem. On the flat ground in front of the Holy City, there were no jagged holes, only a huge semicircular pit, which was mainly caused by the fireball. The huge pit was filled with magma, and the high temperature had caused the ground to melt. Whether it was soil, rocks, minerals, or anything else, they had all melted together to form this magma. It was also because of the explosion of the sun that the Knights of Solemnity were basically all dead, and only a few Knights of Solemnity who were far away from the explosion were still alive. In other words, their bodies were still there, but they had already lost their vitality inside their armor. The moisture in their bodies had been completely dried up, which was the fate of the Knights of Solemnity at the very edge. Compared to the Knights of Solemnity, the Skywings were both better and worse. Most of the Skywings, like most of the Knights of Solemnity, were instantly melted by the explosion of the sun and left the battlefield. However, because they were servants, the Skywings at the very edge were not as dried up as the Knights of Solemnity. Instead, they stubbornly survived. However, they were basically injured to the point where they couldn't continue fighting. Wu Ming had been at the very center of the explosion and had indeed disappeared. In the center of the huge pit, in the slowly condensing magma, a golden hand suddenly extended out of the magma. Immediately after, a golden giant crawled out of the magma as if it had crawled out of a quagmire, but only half of its body was visible. Then, the golden giant's head evaporated like gas, and a figure flew out. This figure was none other than Wu Ming. Why do all of them like to self-destruct? Wu Ming was particularly perplexed by this point. To be honest, Wu Ming had encountered many enemies who liked to self-destruct, such as Shutendaji of the Winter Wood Peculiarity, Ibaraki Boy of the American Peculiarity, and Mordred at the entrance of Higashi Village. But to be honest, self-destructing isn't a bad method. Wu Ming chuckled. This was none other than Lord Hyunryong, who had used a different kind of self-destruct on Gorgon back at the Mesopotamia Singularity. However, thanks to Gawain, another one of my clones has lost its effectiveness. Chapter 787. Wu Ming turned to look at the headless golden giant in the lava. After the golden giant spat out Wu Ming, its body began to turn into golden particles and gradually dissipate. Wu Ming, who was completely protected by the giant, was unscathed, but his avatar had been rendered useless. However, it was not as if there was no good news. The solemn knights of the Holy City had basically been wiped out, and while the Skywings had also suffered heavy casualties, they had only lost their avatars. Their main bodies were completely unharmed. Meanwhile, Wu-Ming had used an avatar to exchange for Gawain, the gatekeeping general. Thus, overall, it was not a loss, and from the overall situation, the Holy City did not have many servants left. Meanwhile, on Wu-Ming's side, putting aside the fact that the Skywing army had suffered heavy casualties from Gawain's self-destruction, Gopral had yet to leave. With that thought in mind, Wu-Ming began to search for Gopral's figure. Cough, cough, cough. Cough, cough. What was that fireball? It came out of nowhere. Gopral's calves and feet were connected to her thighs as she sat on the ground in a rather sorry state, shaking her head that had been blasted by the explosion. Don't look at how Gopral's body was covered in dust and looked like she had been roasted into charcoal. However, Gopral was completely fine. No, to be more precise, she had completely recovered from her injuries. With the support of the Vitality Avatar, no matter how severe her injuries were, as long as Gopral had not been completely reduced to ashes, she would be able to fully recover in no time. When Gawain self-destructed, while Gopral was not in the center, she was still within the range of the explosion, so she had suffered quite a bit of burn damage. However, in that moment of chaos, Gopral's injuries had completely healed by relying on the power of the Vitality Avatar. After coming back to her senses, Gopral looked at her body and saw that she had no other injuries aside from a little black. She immediately began to laugh. Speaking of which, Master's power is really useful. Bang. However, Wu-Ming gave her another blow to the head. Ouch! Gilliel cried out in pain as she clutched her head with tears in her eyes. What are you laughing at? Clean yourself up and get ready to enter the Holy City with me. I know, Master. Gilliel puffed up her cheeks and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Although he was dissatisfied, he had to endure it. While Gopral was cleaning herself up with magic, Wu-Ming collected the surviving Skywing species. Even though Gawain's self-explosion had forced quite a few people out, there were still close to 1,000 survivors. However, due to their injuries, these Skywing species were no longer fit to continue fighting. You guys go back and rest. With that, Wu-Ming gave the order for the gathered Skywings to return. Even if it was a servant, its main body would be fine even if it died here. Wu-Ming did not wish to treat the Skywing species as a lifeless consumable. Even after transforming into Berserker, the Skywings still felt like they were dreaming. Even if it was a dream, Wu-Ming hoped that they would not have a terrible dream this time. Opening the portal, the Skywings obeyed the orders of their master, Wu-Ming, and returned to Abenth. As such, only Wu-Ming and Gilliel were left here. Gilliel, who had finished cleaning herself up, came to Wu-Ming's side. Master, I'm ready. The energetic Gilliel was ready to go. Wu-Ming nodded and looked at the gate of the Holy City. Let's go. Bedivere should be in trouble. In the mysterious Atlas courtyard, the famous Detective Holmes was bringing Chaldea's group to tour the interior of the Atlas courtyard. The strange cross-shaped defense facility made of alchemy materials produced a mechanical sound. On the cross-shaped defense facility, the 4 mechanical tentacles bent, and the mechanical mouth in the center of the cross shot out an energy ray. Bang! However, the ray was blocked by a shield. Accompanied by the roar of the girl, Flying Dance raised her shield and smashed it on the cross-shaped defense facility. Kacha! Boom! Finally, the cross-shaped defense facility produced a small explosion. The shockwave caused by the explosion was blocked by the giant shield. Master, the last one has been eliminated. Thus, the shield-holding girl reported to her master behind her. Well, it's been hard on you, Matthew, Gudatsi said gratefully. It's what I should do, Senior. Matthew smiled, turned the giant shield into a spirit seed, and stood beside Gudatsi. It's been hard on you, Miss Matthew. Although these defense facilities are not strong, they are still a headache for a caster like me. A hearty male voice came from behind, and then Holmes, who was holding a cane and a pipe, appeared. It's normal for this to come from my mouth. You're a detective who knows Bofflo. Then, a profiteer-like female voice came from behind Holmes, and then Da Vinci's wife with Mona Lisa's face appeared. A famous detective always has an assistant who can help him, and my combat power is really not high now. Holmes didn't blush at all, took a puff of his pipe, and explained very calmly. Mr. Holmes, Da Vinci's wife. Matthew greeted the two. As expected of Matthew, very polite. It's been hard on you this time, Matthew. Da Vinci also thanked Matthew. Well, there's no need to say polite words. Are we here, Mr. Holmes? Guerdazi looked at Holmes. Well, it's right in front of us, Holmes said. At the entrance of Atlas Yard, Holmes took the initiative to answer the question of why he was there after announcing his real name. Holmes said that as a detective, he had to solve all the mysteries, including the burning of humanity. And in Atlas Courtyard, it was a necessary investigation to solve the puzzle. The main reason why he was here was to meet Chaldea and the others who saw the burning of humanity, which was Guerdazi and the others. After all, they were the only eyewitnesses. As a detective, he naturally needed the testimony of the eyewitnesses. Although Guerdazi and Matthew believed Holmes, Hassan was obviously full of distrust for this inexplicable man. But because Arash and Da Vinci chose to trust him, Hassan could only leave it at that. After all, the other party was here to find Guerdazi and the others, and Guerdazi and the others were willing to believe him. One was willing to be beaten, and the other was willing to be beaten. Hassan didn't have to be stubborn at all. After that, Holmes said that he wanted to take Chaldea and the others to tour Atlas Courtyard, and Da Vinci, who couldn't resist the temptation, immediately agreed. As a last resort, Gurdaz, Mashu, and Leonardo da Vinci followed Holmes into Atlas Academy. As for Hassan and Arash, there was no doubt that they were abandoned. Chapter 788. Holmes rejected Arash and Hassan's entry with the reason that they have no need to enter at all. Arash was fine with it, but Hassan's bad temper couldn't be tolerated, and Cursed Wrist Hassan also thought that Holmes was full of problems. In the end, after Guerdazi and Da Vinci's comfort and persuasion, Hassan and Arash became gatekeepers. Holmes, Guerdazi, Matthew, and Da Vinci entered Atlas Yard. Da Vinci was making a fuss along the way, while Guerdazi and Matthew answered Holmes' questions. Finally, after defeating the Guardian boss step by step, everyone finally arrived at their destination. The defense facility that Matthew just destroyed was the last gatekeeper. Before entering the destination, Holmes looked at Guerdazi and spoke with emphasis. Fujimaru, do you remember my analysis? Of course I remember, Holmes. You said that King Solomon's burning of humanity was actually completed, so he was dismissive of humans. Correction, it was inferred from your testimony. Holmes took a puff from his pipe and corrected. However, Guerdazi just smiled awkwardly. I remember Mr. Holmes also said that King Solomon was preparing the next plan. In order to avoid Guerdazi's embarrassment, Matthew spoke up. So, do you know what that plan is? Because of Holmes's real name, Mashu, who was standing at the entrance of the Atlas Courtyard, was excited for a while. But this also made Holmes fully realize that Miss Mashu was his loyal fan. Holmes naturally answered all the questions from his fans. Of course I don't know. Such a righteous answer made Guerdazi almost fall down, and Matthew also didn't know what to say. As for Da Vinci, she was still enthusiastically studying the pile of defense facilities that Matthew destroyed. It could be said that Leonardo da Vinci had to study for a while every time he passed a level. Nothing could be done about it. The alchemy techniques of the Atlas Courtyard had aroused da Vinci's interest. Or it could be said that da Vinci was already interested in the alchemy techniques of the Atlas Courtyard. Finally, he turned to look at Holmes, who still did not show any signs of discomfort. If you don't know, you don't know. It's such a simple principle, isn't it? Although I don't know King Solomon's next plan, I have found some clues in the plan of burning humanity. After Holmes finished speaking, he walked to the front door. "Come with me," said Holmes, opening the door and going in. Without any hesitation, Guerrazzi and Matthew entered side by side. Upon seeing the new map, Da Vinci followed them immediately. After entering, both Guerrazzi and Matthew's pupils shrank. "Where is this?" "Inside the Holy City, because they had lost the gate and most of the nights, there weren't many enemies on the street. But similarly, there weren't any humans around. It's too cold here." Wuming walked on the street, looking at the empty interior of the Holy City and frowning. Could it be that the people who entered the Holy City were treated as specimens and stored in the Holy Spear as Gawain said at the beginning? While Wuming was pondering, Gabriel was not idle. Soon, she discovered that the magical fluctuations in a certain place were more intense. "Master, there should be someone fighting over there." Gabriel pointed in a certain direction. "Let's go and take a look. If I'm not wrong, it should be Bedivere." After all, apart from Wuming, Gabriel, and Bedivere, there were no other enemies here. "Yes." Gabriel flapped her wings and flew ahead of Wuming. Wuming didn't land and flew in the direction Gabriel flew. After turning a corner, Wuming saw the scene of Aguin leading a team of knights to surround Bedivere. Bedivere was dealing with the knights, while Gabriel, who had arrived first, was fighting with Aguin. Bedivere's body had been treated by Wuming's healing potion. Although it only treated the symptoms and not the root cause, it was enough for now. But because he was a human, if Bedivere didn't use Silver Arm, he wouldn't be able to defeat them under the encirclement of the knights. But protecting himself wasn't a problem. And logically speaking, Gabriel was much stronger than Aguin, but for some reason, Gabriel couldn't take down Aguin in a short time. Wuming carefully looked at Aguin and discovered that the veins under Wuming's skin were bulging as though they were about to explode, just like a berserker. Not only that, but Wuming could also feel that Aguin's mana had increased by leaps and bounds, as well as his other abilities. That was why Gabriel couldn't take down Aguin in a short time. Could it be that Aguin received the blessing? Wuming guessed. Or is it the result of using a large number of berserk runes? Apart from receiving the blessing of the Lion King's Holy Grail, using a large number of berserk runes could also reach Aguin's current state. But it's only a dead end. Wuming helplessly shook his head. Then, Wuming took out meteor silver from his noble artifact space and rushed towards Aguin. And Aguin had already discovered Wuming the moment he appeared, but because of Gabriel's entanglement, Aguin couldn't pay attention to Wuming. And Wuming actually rushed forward himself, which was completely in line with Aguin's intentions. "Villo!" Aguin bellowed, suddenly flinging Gabriel aside and rushing towards Wuming. Asterisk clang. BZZT BZZT BZZT. Asterisk meteor silver and Aguin's knight's greatsword collided. After an ear-piercing collision sound, the two swords clashed and produced sparks. "Go help Bedivere." Wuming glanced at Gabriel. Gabriel, who was flung away by Aguin, wanted to fight Aguin again, but since Wuming said so, she could only give up. And so, Gabriel vented her resentment on the solemn knights. "Villo ah ah ah!" Aguin bellowed again, causing Wuming to shift his gaze. Wuming's expression turned solemn. He could feel that Aguin's strength was growing bit by bit, and Wuming felt that he would soon be unable to suppress Aguin. As someone who was extremely close to Wuming, Aguin could naturally feel the changes in Wuming. "Ha ha ha! How is it? Villo! This is the power of the Holy Grail's blessing and berserk runes. How is it? Isn't it very powerful? Ah ha ha ha!" Chapter 789. Wuming didn't guess wrong, but Wuming was only half right. Not only did Agravain receive the Holy Grail's blessing, He also used the Berserk spell. This caused Agravain's ability to improve by leaps and bounds, so much so that Wuming had to take Agravain seriously. But the drawbacks are also very clear, Ager Regulus. Wuming was right. After receiving the Holy Grail's blessing and the Berserk spell, Agravain's mental state was not as good as before. From an outsider's point of view, he was like a mental patient who had just escaped from a mental hospital, and a rather dangerous one at that. Ha ha ha. You're right. But as long as I defeat you, everything will be over. No one can be my king's opponent. And as long as you're not here, my king won't fall asleep every day to miss you. Just like that. Everything will be over. Ah ha ha ha. Agravain said, and a large amount of magic instantly gushed out, and Wuming was violently pushed away. You're saying that Artoria falls asleep every day to miss me? Wu Ming didn't pay attention to Ager Guowen's other words, but he was rather moved by Ager Guowen's line of, I fall asleep every day to miss you. If you miss someone so much that you have to fall asleep every day, and relieve it through sleep and dreams, then that person must be very important to you. Wuming had an unrealistic thought. Everything the Lion King was doing was actually for him. However, Agravain didn't have the intention to answer Wuming's doubts. Agravain raised his knight's sword that emitted endless magic and madly charged at Wuming. Die 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 ha 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 ha. With messy black hair, blood-like runes engraved on his black armor, and bloodshot and slightly protruding eyes, Agravain opened his mouth wide and roared like a beast. It seemed that after meeting the person he was obsessed with, Agravain had completely lost his mind. Right now, Agurvan only wanted to eliminate the individual named Vilo Siranthod. Agurwin roared as he leaped up, aimed his sword at Wu Ming and smashed it down. As for Wu Ming, he naturally couldn't be hit. As soon as Agurwin jumped up, Wu Ming used his mana to suddenly jump back out of Agurwin's attack range. Thud! Along with the sound of the knight's boots landing on the ground, Wu Ming silently watched Ager Guowen raise his sword once more. Looks like I was wrong, Wu Ming said. Wu Ming was wrong. The most serious mistake he made was that he didn't trust Artoria. He didn't stand on her side. I clearly said that I would always be with her, but in the end, I stood on the opposite side of her. Wu Ming's eyes dimmed slightly. Even if his intentions were good, even if everything was for the sake of the world, and no matter how many excuses he came up with, Wu Ming was on the opposite side of Artoria. There was no doubt about that. If I had responded to Artoria's summon at the beginning, or if I had stood on Artoria's side after coming to this singularity, I'm afraid the outcome would have been much better. In that case, Mordred, Tristan, and Gawain wouldn't be sent away by his own hands. As for Egwene, he probably wouldn't fall into such a state of madness that he hates the most. Wu Ming had no intention of dodging when he saw Egwene charging at him again. It was as if he had accepted his fate. Roar! Egwene let out an inhuman roar, and the curse of madness spread all over his face. Let me take the pain for you. Wu Ming closed his eyes, and Egwene's night sword arrived in front of Wu Ming. Friend. As soon as Egwene's voice fell, he could clearly see the magic power sweeping across the surroundings, and the entire atmosphere froze. On the other hand, Agurwin was frozen in midair as though he was frozen in ice. His knight's greatsword also stopped in front of Wu Ming. Wu Ming, on the other hand, opened his eyes at this moment. He opened his golden eyes that had turned pure gold at some point in time. Noble and powerful, wise and kind, mysterious and wise God, I shall obtain the divine power of the heavens, the blessing of the earth, and the wisdom of men from you. Thus, I shall become a miracle and lead the world to the dawn. Wu Ming's godlike words came out of his mouth, mysterious and profound. Magician incarnation, activate. He placed his hand on Egwene's night sword, and without saying a word, he squeezed it gently. With the help of a magic circle that faintly flashed, Agwawan's night sword instantly turned into dust and disappeared with the wind. Crush. Wu Ming spoke out the name of the spell he was using as if he was the first to speak. It was as simple as the name itself. Crush. Wu Ming waved his hand, and with the support of magician incarnation, several lune runes appeared in the air and attached themselves to Agwawan's body. The runes had the effects of awaken, dispel, and purify. In addition to the support of magician incarnation, the effect was even more outstanding. In just an instant, the scarlet runes on Agwawan's body disappeared completely. However, what was more serious was that Agwawan's armor was almost completely shattered, and Agwawan's body was also shattered. Wu Ming retracted his magic power, and Agwawan fell to the ground. Villo. Sir. Agwawan looked at Wu Ming weakly. You defeated me again. Ha! Agwawan wanted to laugh at himself, but in the end, he was too weak to do so. At the same time, Agwawan's body was also gradually dissipating. That was the precursor to his exit. The blessing of the Holy Grail and a large number of berserk runes with serious side effects had already caused Agwawan's spirit base to start collapsing. When Agwawan said that everything would be over, he was actually referring to himself. Vero, Lord, I am truly envious of you being able to accompany my king. Agwawan's body began to crumble even faster as he forced himself to finish his last sentence. I really hope to be able to defeat you once. As soon as he finished speaking, there was nothing left in front of Wu Ming. Only bits of blue light were left, and they disappeared with the wind. Chapter 790. Gudatsi and Matthew, who followed Holmes into the room, were stunned. Because the room in front of them was very similar to Chaldea's control room. This is Chaldea? What the hell is going on? Gudatsi held her head in shock. This was an empty Chaldea control room without any equipment such as the Chaldea lens and the Sheba lens. There was also no ceiling. Although Matthew was not as shocked as Gudatsi, he was still very shocked. No, sir, although this place is very similar to Chaldea's control room, this is not Chaldea. Holmes was not surprised that Matthew could make such a judgment. Because, although this place was very similar to Chaldea's control room in many aspects, this place was completely different from Chaldea's control room. After all, as mentioned before, this place was very similar to Chaldea's control room. Miss Matthews' judgment is very correct, and instead of saying that this place is very similar to Chaldea's control room, it's better to say that Chaldea is very similar to this place. With a hearty smile on his face, Holmes explained to Matthew and Gudatsi. Then, he walked to the center of the control room. At this time, Da Vinci also spoke. Ah, you still don't know. Da Vinci was not shocked at all, as if he already knew. There is such a rumor in Chaldea. Da Vinci smiled mysteriously, then continued. It is said that the Chaldea control room was designed according to the workshop in Atlas Courtyard. What? Gudatsi and Matthew were both stunned. They really did not know this news. Although they more or less did not believe Da Vinci's so-called rumor, such a rumor was probably only known by the higher-ups of Chaldea. However, what Da Vinci said was not unreasonable. Now that this singularity was older than Chaldea, then there must be Atlas Courtyard first, and then Chaldea control room. In this case, if there must be a distinction between who came first, it must be Atlas Courtyard first, and Chaldea second. Da Vinci is right. Chaldea's control room was indeed modeled after Atlas Courtyard, or it was with the help of Chaldea Courtyard that Chaldea was established. Holmes followed Da Vinci's words. I'm curious how you know so much. Da Vinci narrowed his eyes. Even she, the second servant of Chaldea, didn't know Chaldea very well, but Holmes knew Chaldea's affairs, as if he was the mastermind behind the scenes. Ha ha, because this is Atlas Courtyard, there is nothing that can't escape. At this point, Holmes changed his words. Except for that, everything in this world can't escape the records here. Holmes said, pointing to the 3 giant stone tablets standing in this place. Because it was open air, the sun scattered here and shone on the 3 towering giant stone tablets. 3-pointed Hermes. Da Vinci slowly read the names of the 3 giant stone tablet. 3-pointed Hermes. Matthew took a deep breath. 3-pointed Hermes. Gudatsi was the same, but Gudatsi was not finished yet. What is that? Inside the Holy City, on the street near the central Holy Tower, Wuming, Jillian, and Bedivere flew, side by side on it. When Wuming used magician incarnation, the surrounding solemn night had been stunned by the magic power released by Wuming. The result of the solemn night was naturally taken care of by Jillian and Bedivere. As a result, the 3 people who were no longer blocked set foot on the road to the central Holy Tower. Master, are you okay? Jillian floated beside Wuming and asked cautiously. Since Aguin's exit, Wuming's whole person changed slightly. Jillian couldn't tell the change in Wuming, but she could feel it. Wuming shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Bedivere also saw the change in Wuming. So, Bedivere spoke. Master Villo, why don't you take the holy sword? Before Bedivere could finish, Wuming stretched out his hand, indicating that Bedivere should stop talking. I'm fine, Bedivere. You have to return the holy sword yourself. Your 1,000 years of waiting is not something I can replace. Hearing that, Bedivere's face became firm and showed an affirmative expression. After that, Wuming stopped, and so did Jillian and Bedivere, because they had reached the foot of the Holy Tower. Let's go, Bedivere. Wuming called out to Bedivere and started walking. What about me? What about me? Master, have you forgotten about me? Gilliel was instantly unhappy. Why did he only call out Bedivere's name? Don't I have to follow? Wuming turned his head and smiled. No need, Jillian. After all, this is your master's personal matter. You go to Tachika and the others. Wuming finished speaking, and a portal instantly appeared above Jillian's head. Before Gopril could react, the teleportation gate started to fall as if it was affected by gravity. As a result, Jillian was swallowed by the portal. When she fell to the ground, the portal disappeared, and so did Jillian. Wuming glanced at Bedivere, and Bedivere nodded, indicating that he was ready. The 2 walked up the Holy Tower step by step. Because the Knights of Solemnity were almost completely wiped out, no, it should be said that they were completely wiped out, no enemies came out to obstruct Wuming and Bedivere. The troops led by Adger were the last batch of Knights of Solemnity, and the only remaining Knights of the Round Table besides him was Lancelot. But because Lancelot was not in the Holy City, there were no enemies in the Holy City. Without the slightest pause, Wuming and Bedivere were only 1 floor away from reaching the top. At this time, a beautiful figure appeared in front of Wuming and Bedivere. Your Highness the Queen. Bedivere immediately knelt on one knee. That's right, the beautiful figure was Guinevere. Minister Bedivere, no need to be so courteous. Guinevere said softly. Guinevere's meaning was very simple. Now that Bedivere was considered a rebel, there was no need for him to salute the enemy queen. This left Bedivere speechless. He wanted to explain, but when he opened his mouth, he didn't know what to say. Bedivere, you go up first, Wuming said to Bedivere. Although he didn't understand Wuming's actions, Bedivere had already carried out Wuming's order. Bedivere walked up the stairs step by step, leaving Wuming and Guinevere looking at each other. Chapter 791. From the looks of it, you should know already. Guinevere crossed his arms and walked down the stairs to Wuming. Guinevere was talking about Artoria. Aguin gave me a hint. Wuming nodded. Then, Wuming showed a helpless smile. By the way, did you know from the beginning? Guinevere shook his head. After you came to the holy city and left, the king talked to me a lot. I only knew then. Guinevere extended his hands. Although Wuming was wearing armor, Guinevere didn't wear a helmet, so Guinevere touched Wuming's cheek. Wuming didn't reject Guinevere's overdone action as he enjoyed Guinevere's touch. As expected, I can't win against the king no matter what I do. Guinevere touched Wuming's face and showed a bitter smile. Although the smile was uglier than crying, sorry, Lia is above you. Wuming's eyes were calm as he spoke the truth without hiding anything. It wasn't irresponsible. On the contrary, it was the most responsible thing to do in Guinevere's opinion. I know, that's why I can't win against the king no matter what. Guinevere raised his head and tried his best not to cry. Guinevere's love for Wuming was no less than the others. Whether it was falling into Morgan Le Fay's trap in the end, or descending as a berserker because of his obsession with Wuming, it was obvious that Guinevere had feelings for Wuming. But Wuming smiled. I didn't say that I would give up on you if I chose Lia, Miss Guinevere. Wuming touched Guinevere's cheek and wiped away the tears at the corner of Guinevere's eyes with a proud smile. This isn't Britain. I can't do whatever I want. I won't spare either you or Lia. Wuming's domineering and gentle words stunned Guinevere for a moment. When he reacted, Guinevere smiled. Really, Sir Villo is really overbearing. She rubbed Wuming's hand, but because of the gauntlet, it didn't feel very good. I'll be waiting for you, Mr. Villo. After Guinevere finished speaking, he leaned into Wuming's embrace, stood on his tiptoes, and wrapped his hands around Wuming's neck before gently kissing him. Guinevere looked at Wuming with eyes full of love, and then gently closed his eyes. Although Wuming was a little surprised, he immediately reacted and hugged Guinevere. He closed his eyes and enjoyed this moment of peace. After a brief kiss, the two of them separated their heads from each other. Because Wuming sucked it clean, he didn't pull the thread or anything like that. Cough cough, really, Sir Villo, I didn't expect you to be so skilled. Guinevere's cheeks were slightly red as he lay in Wuming's embrace with love in his eyes. Wuming was not a newbie, but Guinevere's movements were still immature, but he was still quite skilled. I've practiced before, but what's wrong with you? Wuming deliberately pretended to be angry. This time, Guinevere was truly frightened. Sir Villo, I didn't practice with anyone else. It's just that sometimes when I look in the mirror. Guinevere covered his mouth and blushed. It's just a joke. I'll say it again, I'll always believe you. Wuming patted Guinevere's head and apologized. Although it was just a joke, Wuming was quite proud that he got Guinevere to talk. Sir Villo, you're so. Guinevere lowered his head. But it was time to end this. When he looked up again, Guinevere's cheeks were still blushing. Sir Villo, this is the kiss I promised you. I'll always be waiting for you. It's a promise. In front of the three-pointed Hermes in the Atlas courtyard, Holmes explained a lot, but Godotzi didn't understand the three-pointed Hermes at all. After all, Godotzi's magic theory wasn't enough. So Holmes gave a rather simple explanation of Goo Goo. In the end, Da Vinci summarized it with one sentence. Simply put, it's a world-class encyclopedia that answers all questions. I see, it's a bit like the internet on a computer. Godotzi clenched her left fist and punched her right hand. Senior's analogy is very apt, Matthew said awkwardly. As long as you understand. Holmes took a puff from his pipe and smiled. Just like a detective, there were many mysterious events that couldn't be understood. But those weren't important. As long as there were completely reliable clues and logical reasoning, the famous detective could find the murderer. It was as simple as 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Although sometimes it was equal to 3 ahem, all in all, as long as you understand. While I was in the Atlas courtyard, I used this three-pointed Hermes to search for a lot of information about human combustion. Holmes turned his back to Godotzi and the others. So, Mr. Holmes, did you solve the mystery? Miss Matthew, who was a fan of Holmes, was very excited. Ahem, that's not the point. Holmes tilted his head and looked at Matthew. I can't believe Roman. What? There's something wrong with Dr. Roman? Gudatzi repeated Holmes' words in shock. But why? Matthew was also puzzled by Holmes' words. No one was surprised that Holmes knew about Roman. After all, this was the Atlas courtyard. Holmes could even collect information about Gudatzi, Matthew, and Da Vinci. It was impossible that Roman, the head of a normal Chaldea medical institution, couldn't collect information about him. According to my investigation, in the Holy Grail War in 2004, Marispili Animsphia was also involved. Holmes' voice came. Animsphia? This surname, could it be? Gudatzi was stunned. She didn't know Marispili, but she noticed this person's surname. It was the same surname as Olga Marie. That's right, sir. Marispili Animsphia is the former director of Chaldea, the father of director Olga Marie, Matthew confirmed. After slaughtering the other 6 participants in the Holy Grail War, he won the final victory and obtained the Holy Grail, Holmes continued. Wait, that means the former director had already obtained a Holy Grail before the Anthropocene? Matthew was shocked. Then what did the former director wish for? Gudatzi asked curiously. Ahem, that's still not the point. Holmes shook his head again. The point is, in that war, Marispili also fought with an assistant, and this assistant was specially promoted to Chaldea the next year and became the head of the medical institution in Chaldea at the age of 22. After that, Holmes took a puff from his pipe and exhaled. That person, could it be? Matthew opened his eyes wide and said slowly. Yes, that person is Roman. At this time, Da Vinci, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. Chapter 792. Is it possible that the doctor really has a problem? Seeing that Da Vinci admitted that the man was Roman, Gudatzi began to believe what Holmes said about Roman has a problem. Matthew's eyes also showed shock and doubt. After all the blame was directed at Dr. Roman. No, Holmes' reasoning is completely wrong. Da Vinci's words were rather cruel, as if he was defending Holmes for suspecting Roman. This made Holmes shrug his shoulders helplessly and take a puff from his pipe. Then, Da Vinci looked at Gudatzi and Matthew. Tachika, Matthew, I can only tell you that although Roman has his own secrets, he is absolutely not a problem. You have to remember this. Da Vinci's sapphire-like eyes were full of seriousness. Being looked at by these serious eyes, Gudatzi and Matthew's body could not help but tighten. Immediately, Gudatzi reacted. Yes, Da Vinci. I'll remember it. Gudatzi stood up straight and answered Leonardo da Vinci seriously. I also remember, Da Vinci. I'm sorry that we have doubts about Dr. Roman. Matthew was quite guilty, and his small head could not help but lower. Don't feel guilty, Matthew, all of this is related to Holmes' reasoning error. If you want to blame someone, blame him. Da Vinci said the most terrible words with the most beautiful face. Ha ha ha, I really appreciate that. For Da Vinci's joke, Holmes was also very cooperative. Of course, he did not care. With Da Vinci's guarantee, then I will temporarily put Dr. Roman on the alibi list. After all, with the 3-pointed Hermes, Holmes also knew that as one of the first servants to appear in Chaldea, Da Vinci was a founding father-level figure. Since there was Da Vinci's guarantee, it was not impossible to believe Roman for the time being. However, Roman was still under Holmes' suspicion. After all, Holmes had said, for now. All right. Gudatzi suddenly shouted. Mr. Holmes, can this 3-pointed Hermes help us find the location of the Sun King? Gudatzi suddenly had an idea. After all, their purpose in coming to the desert this time was not to look for the Atras Academy, but to conquer the Sun King. After all, Sherlock Holmes had said that apart from a certain existence that could not be recorded by the 3-pointed Hermes, Everything in this world was recorded by the three-pointed Hermes. In that case, it should be possible to get Holmes to help find out where the Sun King was. Don't worry about that. Someone will take you to the Sun King later. Holmes laughed heartily. Will someone take us there? Gudatsi didn't understand. She couldn't imagine who would take them to the Sun King. Well, it's time for you to go. Holmes didn't continue to explain to Gudatsi and started to drive them away. Mr. Holmes, are you not going to come with us? Matthew opened his big eyes and looked puzzled. According to the past practice, new friendly servants should act together with them. I won't. I still have some things to do here. Holmes refused. Since Holmes said so, Gudatsi and others couldn't say anything more. After looking at Da Vinci, who nodded in agreement, Gudatsi, Matthew, and Da Vinci left and returned to the entrance of Atra's academy. After Gudatsi and others left, Holmes took a puff from his pipe and puffed out the smoke in his mouth. So, let's start a new round of reasoning, my friend. Holmes turned his head, and a silver-white figure was reflected in Holmes' retina. In the central tower of the Holy City, Wuming didn't delay at all. After saying goodbye to Guinevere, he went to the highest floor. What was reflected in Wuming's eyes was Bedivere, who was kneeling on one knee as if he was offering something. With a satisfied expression, his body turned into debris and was blown away by the wind from afar. And in front of the broken Bedivere, there was no doubt that the fully armed Lion King Artoria Pendragon. Although Wuming wasn't very clear about what Bedivere did during the time when he didn't come up, he could guess it even if he guessed. Return the Holy Sword. Only by returning the Holy Sword, Bedivere, who had lost his obsession, would his body, which had lived for thousands of years, collapse. After all, the human body will undoubtedly turn into dust after thousands of years. But in this way, after returning the Holy Sword, Artoria's holy spear should also disappear. Anyway, Wuming didn't see the holy spear in Artoria's hand. Villo, no, I should call you Wuming, right? Artoria, who was fully armed and whose face couldn't be seen, said while disarming her armor. She was still wearing the revealing blue tights and a small red cloak on the collar. But the point was that Artoria's eyes, which were originally shining, had lost its light. It wasn't the so-called highlight, but it felt different. The original Lion King Artoria was like a goddess, but now Artoria's goddess aura had basically completely disappeared. Instead, she was more like a king who understood people's hearts. Well, she understood people's hearts in all aspects. Leah, I'm sorry. For Artoria to be able to say Wuming's name, Wuming wasn't surprised at all. Although it was a long time ago, Wuming still remembered that Wuming once told Artoria his name. Artoria didn't react to Wuming's apology. After all, she had grown up and was no longer the little girl who didn't understand people's hearts. I don't accept your apology, Artoria said righteously and frankly. Well, Wuming was speechless, but it was also within Wuming's expectations. It wasn't that Artoria didn't accept Wuming's apology, but because Wuming was prepared for any response from Artoria, whether positive or negative. After all, no matter if she was a girl or a queen, as long as she was a woman, her thoughts and actions were not something you could understand in a short time. I'm sorry, I'll let you do whatever you want, but please let me know before I die. Wuming said as he walked toward Artoria. The plan you prepared, is it really for me? However, Artoria was thinking about Peach. Of course not. Chapter 793. Wuming didn't know what to say for a while. I'm doing this for the sake of the humans. But I summoned the Knights of the Round Table to see if I could find you, Artoria said without changing her expression. As expected of the Queen. But why did I hear from Guinevere that you summoned her here to look for me? Before they came up, Guinevere briefly explained the situation to Wuming when he was cuddling with Guinevere. Because Guinevere was obsessed with wombing. Guinevere, as a berserker, had the ability to search for wombing. It was called wombing radar. Artoria wanted to use this ability of Guinevere's to summon Guinevere. Otherwise, why would Artoria bring the useless queen here? To be a pretty vase? Artoria said that looking in the mirror every day was enough. Artoria didn't say anything. She just closed her eyes. Then, Artoria opened her eyes and stared at Wooming with her amber eyes. "She is talking nonsense," said Artoria, who was talking nonsense with a straight face. Ignoring Artoria's words, Wooming continued. "Guinevere also told me that you sleep every day to vent your longing for me. You try to relieve your longing with dreams." After Wooming said that, Artoria's face blushed. She looked like a girl whose secret was exposed. "I'm kidding." Wooming showed a mischievous smile. Guinevere didn't tell Wooming this. After all, Guinevere wasn't a roundworm in Artoria's stomach. How could he know a secret that Artoria didn't tell him? Wooming's words made Artoria speechless. "If it was the younger me, I'd probably be mad at you right now," Artoria said with nostalgia. Of course, Artoria was referring to the younger me, before she became a queen. "Maybe I won't be mad at you like a little girl anymore." As a queen, she had to look at the big picture. No matter what, as a queen, she had to be steady and reliable. Artoria, who wanted to become an ideal queen, had already met her ideal requirements. So what? Wooming didn't think there was anything wrong with Artoria like this. As long as we love each other, nothing is a problem. Walking in front of Artoria, Wooming put on his most perfect smile. Artoria also smiled. Artoria, with the corners of her mouth slightly raised, looked quite handsome and beautiful at this moment. "As expected, you can only be my queen." Guinevere had no choice but to step aside. Artoria said as she grabbed Wooming's armor by the collar and pulled him in front of her. Wait a minute, Lia Yu." Staring at Artoria, who was about to kiss him and savor her sweet scent, Wooming blushed for the first time. "As a queen, I don't care about small things. I want to admit that I miss you, because I want you to be my queen," Artoria said in a domineering tone. Wooming was stunned. "No, this, but..." Wooming was at a loss for words. He did not know what to say. Normally, such words would be said by a man like him. As expected of a queen, it's useless to say more. "This is a punishment for not being on my side. It's also compensation for missing you," Artoria said as she kissed Wooming. Wooming was stunned because he was kissed by force. But he immediately reacted. After all, he had to take the initiative for this kind of thing. He took off the armor and hugged Artoria. Wooming began a new enjoyment. However, before the two could go deeper, a terrifying lightning strike was launched from a distance. The target was the location of Wooming and Artoria, the tallest holy tower in the holy city. A violent explosion occurred. Boom! In a desert pit at the entrance of the Atlas courtyard, Hassan and Cursed Wrist Hassan paced back and forth uneasily. Quiet Hassan was quietly squatting in the corner, but the anxiety in his eyes was no less than the other two Hassans. Arash, on the other hand, came to the sandpit rather calmly and carefully investigated the situation nearby. After a round of investigation, Arash walked down the sandpit and began to rest. It was a shift change. Because there was no need for everyone to investigate together, they agreed to do it one by one so that the other servants could also rest. "What's wrong, everyone? Are you still worried?" Arash saw the look on Hassan's faces and said in a cheerful tone, trying to pull everyone out of their depression. "Well, after all, that Holmes is very suspicious." Cursed Wrist Hassan stood up, and then it was his turn to investigate the surroundings. "Master Chaldea, they just went in with him. It was a reckless move." Hassan's tone was a bit harsh. Wasn't that right? He was worried about their safety, so he followed them. In the end, he was rejected. Anyone would probably be angry. But Master Tachika and the others seemed to trust that woman quite a bit. Because the other party had a good relationship with Wu Ming, he was also respected by Quiet Hassan. Well, Ms. Da Vinci and Ms. Matthew are very reliable servants. They will be fine. Arash comforted everyone. I hope so. Cursed Wrist Hassan said, jumped into the sandpit, and began to investigate. Hassan and Quiet Hassan did not speak again. Although Arash did not know these two, he also knew that these two did not like to talk, so he sat down and rested. Just then, the door of the Atlas courtyard opened. Gudazzi, Matthew, and Da Vinci drove out in 2 trucks with messy things. This made Bigface Hassan, Quiet Hassan, and Arash startled. They thought that something had run out of the Atlas courtyard. Hey everyone, Da Vinci is back. Da Vinci, who was in charge of driving, said in a lively tone. Gudazzi and Matthew, who were sitting behind Da Vinci, smiled awkwardly. This car was temporarily put together by Da Vinci with the fragments of the alchemy creations on the way back. The purpose was naturally to collect the alchemy creations that Da Vinci was interested in along the way. Because Da Vinci used wood and minerals to make cars, Gudazzi and Matthew were not surprised that Da Vinci could make a car. What are you guys doing? Arash looked at the messy things on the car and was a little puzzled. Ahahaha. Da Vinci wanted to pick them up personally, we couldn't help it. Gudazzi scratched the back of her head. This was also why they were so slow. It did not take much time to fight all the way back, but on the way back they had to pick up garbage and wait for Da Vinci to make a car. That was why they were delayed for so long. It's good that nothing happened. Did Holmes do anything to you? Hassan asked worriedly. No, Mr. Holmes just gave us a tour of the Atris court. Mashu smiled. It was better to hide the things that Holmes told them about the burning of humanity. It's good that you are fine. Quiet Hassan nodded. At this time, Cursed Wrist Hassan suddenly rushed down. Not good, we are surrounded. Chapter 794. What? Whether it was Hassan, Arash, Gudazzi, or Matthew, everyone was shocked. We're surrounded? Da Vinci did not panic. Instead, he sat in the car and thought about something. Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan, did you see who the enemy is? After getting out of the car, Matthew immediately asked Cursed Wrist Hassan, who had just gone to investigate. They're from the Holy City. The leader is the Knight of the Round Table, Lancelot, Cursed Wrist Hassan said in a heavy tone. Hassan had dealt with the Knights of the Round Table for a long time and naturally knew them. However, it was because of this that Cursed Wrist Hassan's tone was heavy. Lancelot is known as the strongest person below the British Silver Dragon. It is said that other than the British Silver Dragon Villo, no one among the Knights of the Round Table can defeat him. Even Gawain, who was favored by the sun, was defeated by Lancelot in the mythical history records. Lancelot. Matthew was a little stunned, as if he was thinking about something. Are you okay, Matthew? Gudazzi, who got out of the car with Matthew, held Matthew's hand and asked with concern. I'm fine, Senior. After all, that knight Lancelot is Mr. Galahad's father. I'm about to face Mr. Lancelot. I feel a little strange. Matthew explained the reason with a strange expression. Don't worry, Matthew. Even if your father comes, I'll be by your side to support you. Gudazzi thought that Matthew, who was affected by the Galahad spiritual base, was afraid of facing his father. Hence, she encouraged Matthew. However, Matthew looked embarrassed. No, Senior. How should I put it? I don't know why, but I just want to go out and teach Mr. Lancelot a lesson. Matthew's eyes turned cold. So it's not that you're afraid of being close to your father. This time, it was Gudazzi's turn to be embarrassed. All right. Tachika and Matthew, both of you calm down. It's not certain whether we'll fight or not. Da Vinci made a sound and signaled Gudazzi and Matthew to calm down first. Gudazzi and Matthew subconsciously repeated, It's not certain whether we'll fight or not. Ms. Da Vinci, why would you say that? Cursed Wrist Hassan walked up to Da Vinci and wanted to ask. He did not think that the Knights of the Round Table would let Hassan go, nor did he think that the Knights of the Round Table would let Chaldea go. Although the phrase, "there are no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits," was well said, there was no benefit between them. The other party wanted to kill them all, and Chaldea's men had to protect the people that the other party wanted to kill. Therefore, to them, who had already become enemies and had no benefits, there was no need for them to reconcile. Not to mention that the other party was a Knight of the Round Table who obeyed the Lion King's every command, so it was even more impossible for them to negotiate. Well, after all, we can't run away, right? Da Vinci got off the car and came to the ground. He patted his car. Although we can also rely on this car to try to rush out, the possibility of it being destroyed halfway is quite high. After walking to the back of the crowd, Da Vinci turned around. So, let's see what the other party's intentions are. Guidazzi and Matthew were the first to nod. After all, there was no other way. Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hundred Face Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan looked at each other, and then nodded after getting the consent of the other two. In that case, let me be the vanguard. After all, someone had to make contact with the other party first to determine the other party's intentions. Otherwise, if everyone went to talk to the other party together and the other party was hostile, they would be walking right into a trap. Without waiting for Guidazzi and the others to agree, Arash jumped into the sandpit with a big stride. "Mr. Arash!" Matthew called out instinctively, but Arash had already left. "Don't worry, Sir Matthew, Arash is not a weak existence." Cursed Wrist Hassan comforted him. After all, he was a great hero who tore the land apart. "Let's go, everyone. Let's follow and take a look," Da Vinci suggested. After all, they had to cover for Arash. On the ground, at the edge of the sandpit, Guidazzi and the others were half squatting here, looking at Arash, who was in front of Lancelot's team. Arash, who was close to Lancelot's team, was not attacked by Lancelot. On the contrary, Lancelot seemed to be on the same side. Anyway, facing the vigilant Arash, Lancelot looked like he had a headache. Guidazzi and Matthew were confused. "Is Lancelot really going to reconcile with us?" Guidazzi said instinctively. "I hope so." Whether it was on behalf of Galahad or as Matthew himself, Matthew hoped that Lancelot could stand on their side. Emotionally, Lancelot was Galahad's father, and Matthew did not want her and Lancelot to oppose each other. Logically, Lancelot was a powerful knight of the Round Table and a very reliable helper. Lancelot said something to Arash, and in the end, Lancelot had his team stay where they were. He kept a distance from Arash and followed Arash to the sandpit. It seemed that Lancelot was going to fight alone. When Lancelot approached, Cursed Wrist Hassan, Redeemer Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan immediately rushed out and surrounded Lancelot in a triangular formation. "Hassan, huh? Please don't do anything. Please believe me. I'm on your side," Lancelot said calmly, as if it was a matter of course. "You have no reason to be on our side," Cursed Wrist Hassan said vigilantly with a dagger in his hand. Looking at how vigilant Hassan was, and then looking at Guidazzi, Matthew, and Da Vinci at the edge of the sandpit, Lancelot lowered his head subconsciously. In fact, it was because Lancelot saw Matthew and panicked for a moment. Matthew, Guidazzi, and Da Vinci walked over and asked Lancelot. "Mr. Lancelot, do you have any evidence to prove that you're on our side?" Matthew looked impartial. "Didn't Sir Villo tell you?" Lancelot was puzzled. Guidazzi and Matthew looked at each other and shook their heads. "Sir Villo didn't tell me anything about you." Matthew's heartless words hurt Lancelot a little, but as a father, he had to be strong. "Actually, Sir Villo came to me before, and I had already betrayed him," Lancelot explained. "Then why did you lead your troops to attack my village?" Cursed Wrist Hassan questioned. The dagger in his hand reflected the light of the sun, and it was chilling. As if responding to each other, Redeemer Hassan's dagger and Tranquil Hassan's poisoned blade also emitted a strange light. This. Sir Villo asked me to continue to stay as a spy under the king, so I had to lead my troops to attack your village. Lancelot tried to explain, but Redeemer Hassan was the first to voice his disbelief. Quibble. Gudatzi and Matthew did not know what to do at the moment, and Arash also frowned. Da Vinci, on the other hand, smiled as if she had seen through everything, but she did not say anything. In this stalemate, a male voice came from behind Gudatzi and the others. "All right, everyone put down your weapons. Lancelot is one of us." Chapter 795. Assassin. Senior Villo, Sir Villo. The first to react were Gudatzi, Matthew, and Quiet Hassan. Everyone looked behind them, and the newcomer was indeed Wooming. Jumping from the sandpit to the ground, Wooming patted the dust on his sleeve. "Cursed wrist, 100 faces, put down your weapons. Lancelot is telling the truth. When he met me, I turned him into a traitor. The reason why he only called out Cursed Wrist Hassan and 100 Faces Hassan was that Quiet Hassan had already put down his weapon when Wooming spoke for the first time. So obedient." Cursed Wrist Hassan hesitated for a moment, then went into an attacking stance. However, 100 Faces Hassan aimed his weapon at Wooming. "Maybe Lancelot found someone to impersonate you to confuse us?" As soon as 100 Faces Hassan said that, Gudatzi, who originally wanted to throw herself into Wooming's arms, stopped. Quiet Hassan, who was standing beside Wooming at some point, also became slightly vigilant. Indeed, what 100 Faces Hassan said was possible. After all, the timing of Wooming's appearance was too coincidental. In the face of 100 Faces Hassan's suspicion, Wooming naturally had a way to prove himself. Wooming waved his hand, and in an instant, a strange black-purple portal opened above his head. The portal instantly freefall and swallowed 100 Faces Hassan at an extremely fast speed. Then, another portal opened above the sandpit. In an instant, a black object fell out of this portal. The former was the entrance, and the latter was the exit. 100 Faces Hassan fell into the sandpit without a doubt. Thump! The sound of an object hitting the ground came from the sandpit. There was no doubt that Wooming transferred 100 Faces Hassan into the sandpit. Only Silent Wonder would be able to use such a strange teleportation gate. "It's the real assassin." Gudatzi was overjoyed. She threw herself into Wooming's arms. Wooming rubbed Gudatzi's little head and let go of her. He looked at everyone rather seriously. "The holy city has been attacked." In the center of the holy city, the original holy tower was now in ruins. As if it had been set up by TNT, the entire sacred tower was completely reduced to ruins under the thunderous attack. Not only the holy tower, but the entire holy city was also affected. Houses collapsed, the ground was destroyed, and trees were burning as if they had experienced a natural disaster. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the lightning that struck the holy city was. In the ruins, a burst of mana suddenly burst out, scattering the ruins and wreckage. Wooming held Artoria in his left hand and Guinevere in his right. He released his magic power to protect them. When the lightning struck, Wooming reacted instantly and took the lead to protect Artoria in front of him. Then, Wooming opened a portal at lightning speed, and came to Guinevere's side on the lower floor of the holy tower. He rescued Guinevere, who was almost knocked out. As for how to avoid the damage caused by the explosion, Wooming took advantage of the gap after entering the portal and not coming out. To be honest, if not for Wooming's quick reaction, Guinevere would have returned to the Martyr's Palace with the holy tower. "Are you okay?" Wooming looked at Guinevere with concern. "Master Villo, I'm fine." Although Guinevere was indeed fine, he was definitely shocked. Being suddenly attacked by a missile, and only knowing after being hit, plus being at the scene, anyone would be shocked. Looks like it's the Sun King's doing. Out of Wuming's arms, Artoria looked calmly to the west. All right, Artoria was a king, and a king would not be scared. The attack just now came from the west where the Sun King was. Then, Artoria frowned and stared at Wuming and Guinevere. How much longer do you want to hug me? Wuming's mouth twitched as he let go of Guinevere's waist. But Guinevere had no intention of letting go. Master Villo, I'm so scared. Guinevere, who had his arms around Wuming's neck, leaned into Wuming's arms and rubbed against Wuming's chest. Wuming did not know if Guinevere was faking it or was really scared, but Wuming knew one thing. That was, the veins on Artoria's forehead were popping. But Wuming could not push Guinevere away. After all, if he pushed away a cute girl who threw herself at him, he would not be a man. So, Wuming immediately changed the topic. So, after losing the Holy Spear, the entire Holy City has become ordinary? Artoria nodded matter-of-factly. After all, it was the Holy Spear that supported the defense of the Holy City. After Bedivere returned the Holy Sword to me, Lungaminiad disappeared. It was like dripping ink into water and the water would be assimilated by the ink. It was an irreversible process, but the defense of the Holy City was supported by the Holy Spear. Without the Holy Spear, the Holy City naturally became an ordinary city. The Holy Tower, which was the incarnation of the Holy Spear, also became an ordinary tower after the Holy Spear disappeared. The Sun King really knows how to take advantage of opportunities. Artoria looked in the direction of the Sun King expressionlessly, but the anger in her voice could not be concealed. Anyone would be angry if they were hit while they were down. He might not be the Sun King anymore, Wuming suddenly said. What do you mean? Artoria turned her head and looked at Wuming expressionlessly. Then, Wuming told Artoria his deduction. After thinking for a few seconds, Artoria nodded. That is indeed a possibility. No wonder the Sun King put aside his pride to cooperate with me. Then, Artoria reached out her hand and grasped the air. An invisible weapon appeared in Artoria's hand. It was the holy sword that withstood the wind enchantment Excalibur. How dare you trick me? Even without the holy spear, the dignity of the Lion King cannot be violated. Artoria glanced at Guinevere, who was still lying in Wuming's arms, and said to Wuming, You should be able to use the teleportation ability that I don't know about, right? Hearing Artoria's words, Wuming understood what she meant. Of course. Wuming gave Artoria a reliable smile. My plan is ruined, but we must continue to save people. Therefore, the person who possessed the Sun King must be dealt with. Logically speaking, after Artoria's holy spear disappeared, the singularity without the support of the Holy Grail and Holy Spear should have begun to repair itself. However, it did not. Without a doubt, this was the work of the Sun King. As you wish, my king. Of course, Artoria's proactive explanation might also be a bit arrogant. However, Artoria sprayed it all over Wuming's face. Then why are you still hugging my queen? Let's go. Looking at the angry Artoria and the unhappy Guinevere in his arms, Wuming smiled awkwardly. Well, there was also a bit of jealousy. Chapter 796. The one who was most concerned about the attack on the Holy City had to be Lancelot. Sir Villo, weren't you the one who attacked the Holy City? Lancelot was quite puzzled and spoke carefully, afraid to embarrass Wuming. However, since Lancelot spoke, he would definitely embarrass Wuming. Wuming coughed awkwardly and then began to explain. After I attacked the Holy City, someone launched a sneak attack from behind. Sir Villo, what the hell is going on? Lancelot heard and immediately became nervous. Although Lancelot betrayed, he betrayed to save Artoria. Therefore, Lancelot still regarded Artoria as the king. Don't worry, Lancelot. The Holy City was attacked by me. Before the enemy attacked, except for the king and the queen, everyone else had already left. Wuming explained to Lancelot quite calmly. In short, in this kind of situation, there was no need to worry at all. It seems that this is even worse, Matthew complained in a low voice, and Godotzi, who heard Matthew's complaint, nodded in agreement. Gawain and Egwene have already. Lancelot looked a little sad. Wooming meant that Gawain and the others had also left. Even if he appeared as a servant who had already passed away, Lancelot still mourned for Gawain and Egwene's departure. For Lancelot, the second most unbearable thing in the world was to fight with his companions and the king. Of course, the most unbearable thing is to turn against one's daughter or son, and become enemies with one's mother. He patted Lancelot's shoulder, indicating Lancelot's condolences. Bedivere has already returned the holy sword to the king. The king and the queen are fine, and they have also promised us that they will fight the last enemy with us. This was good news for Lancelot. Is that so? The king is saved. Lancelot closed his eyes and sighed in relief. Even Matthew and Godotzi were delighted. Godotzi was happy to have strong support to help them, while Matthew had both the former and the joy of being saved by the king. After all, Galahad also influenced Matthew. Immediately after, Lancelot seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Wooming. By the way, is Bedivere okay? After completing his mission, as an ordinary person who had lived for 1,000 years, he naturally turned into ashes and disappeared. Wooming tried to make his tone as calm as possible, trying not to cause panic. However, this was impossible. Hearing Wooming's words, Godotzi, Matthew, Da Vinci, Arash, Lancelot, and Hassan were all taken aback. Senior Villo, are you saying that Mr. Bedivere is a human? Matthew asked in disbelief. The others also looked at Wu Ming as if they were asking for an explanation. So, Wu Ming began to explain. It's normal that you don't know. I guess Bedivere didn't tell you. However, one thing is clear, Bedivere is a human and not a servant. This is true. This should be Merlin's ability. Lancelot sighed. In his impression, only Merlin had the ability to let an ordinary person live for so long. Then how did Mr. Bedivere live for 1,000 years? Matthew shook his lips and was quite sad. The others also lowered their heads to express their condolences to Bedivere, including Hassan, who had always been hostile to Knights of the Round Table. After all, unlike the servants, Bedivere was a real human being. An ordinary human being could live for 1,000 years. The point was that loneliness, that persistence, it was not something that anyone could endure and persist. Bedivere was able to survive alone. In addition to Merlin's help, there was also an extremely persistent belief. You must return the holy sword to my king. You must. With this in mind, Bedivere persevered and walked down this path, achieving success. So, what Bedivere needed was not sympathy and pity, but respect. Bedivere left satisfied. You are disrespecting him, Wooming said in a joking tone. And with Bedivere's achievements, he will definitely become a heroic spirit. Even if he did not become a heroic spirit, Wooming would go to the Inhibition Force and ask the Inhibition Force to help Bedivere become a heroic spirit. Although becoming a heroic spirit was also a kind of torture in another sense, Wooming believed that Bedivere would be willing. Of course, if Bedivere was not willing, Wooming would not force it. Bedivere succeeded in awakening the Lion King. What we need to do now is to fight the last enemy and repair this singularity. Wooming's eyes were firm as he spoke from the bottom of his heart. Yes. Matthew and Godotzi replied seriously. After all, they would have a chance to see Bedivere in the future, so they shouldn't be too sad. Hassan and Arash nodded silently. Lancelot clenched his fists, and his eyes became firm. Good seeing everyone so energetic. This genius also cheered up. Da Vinci smiled and livened up the atmosphere. By the way, when Holmes said, "Someone will take us to the Sun King," I thought that person was talking about Lancelot, but it turned out to be a Villo. It was precisely because Lancelot was the person who would take them to the Sun King that Da Vinci did not panic after knowing that they were surrounded by Lancelot. It is not wrong to say that Lancelot is the person who will lead you. After all, he originally had this intention. Wu Ming said, looking at Lancelot. Lancelot nodded knowingly. Indeed, after I retreated from the village of the mountain folk, I had a showdown with Nidicles. After all, the other party is an enemy. I wanted to help Chaldea get rid of Nidicles in advance to relieve the pressure. Then, Lancelot showed a bitter expression. As a result, I didn't expect that the other party had already prepared a teleportation magic. However, when she left, she told me the current location of Master Chaldea and asked me to come and help. So, I came directly to Atlas Academy. It seems that there should be Nidicles magic at the entrance of Atlas Academy. The magic she set up is likely to be a kamikaze magic, and it is quite hidden, Da Vinci said thoughtfully. It was precisely because it was a kamikaze magic that Da Vinci did not discover Nidicles magic in his negligence. As for Nidicles knowing about Atlas Academy, after all, Atlas Academy was in the Egyptian desert. It was normal for Nidicles to know about Atlas Academy. Thus, when they entered the Atlas courtyard, they triggered Nidicles' spell, which allowed Nidicles to learn of their whereabouts. That's not right, Wu Ming suddenly said. Everyone looked at Wu Ming. Nidicles returned to the Sun King's great temple, right? Wu Ming looked at Lancelot. Lancelot nodded. It should be so. After all, she is one of the Sun King's people. But the Sun King, he might not be the Sun King anymore, Gudazzi said in a heavy tone. Then, Matthew showed a worried expression. Miss Nidicles is in danger. Chapter 797. 5 kilometers away from the great shrine of Ramses II, a dark purple ripple appeared out of thin air. Wu Ming, Artoria, and Guinevere walked out of the portal that looked like a black hole. Is that the temple of the Sun King? Artoria was expressionless. She looked at the buildings in the distance with cold eyes. Although Artoria knew that the Sun King had a shrine, she had never seen it before. Ramses II was the same. He knew where the holy city was, but just like Artoria had never seen his great shrine, Ramses II had never seen the holy city. Because both of them needed to stay in their headquarters. Because the enemy set up defensive spells around the place, I can't directly teleport in. Therefore, Wu Ming chose to open the portal 5 kilometers away from the shrine. Anyway, it was only 5 kilometers, which was not far for a servant. Of course, even if she was teleported to a place further away, Artoria would not care too much about it in her current state. Let's go, Artoria said coldly and handsomely. Then she started walking toward the buildings. This gave Guinevere a fright. My king, are you going to break in? It was not that Guinevere was scared, but now that Artoria had lost her holy lance, she might not be a match for Ramses II's great shrine. She was not afraid of dying, but she was against dying meaninglessly. However, Guinevere's real thoughts were, I want to stay with Sir Villo for a while more, as a pillow person. Artoria naturally knew what Guinevere was thinking. Artoria was already quite unhappy with Guinevere's behavior, and now she was even more unhappy. You can go back to the holy city. My king, you want me to go back to the holy city that has become a ruin? What if something bad happens to me? Guinevere covered his face and cried while taking the initiative to lie in Wu Ming's arms. Artoria did not say anything, but the bulging veins on her forehead made Wu Ming, who was holding Guinevere, gulp nervously. Artoria knew that Guinevere was not as weak as he looked. After all, he was a berserker, wasn't he? Wu Ming, who felt that the atmosphere was not right, quickly changed the topic. Actually, if we could open a portal in the Great Shrine, we wouldn't have to enter the danger zone at all. That was because they would be able to unleash their precious artifacts at the teleportation gate. Not only would they be able to attack the other party, they would also be able to ensure their own safety. So, can we do it now? Artorias stared at Wu Ming. No. No, then what's there to say? It's time to go, my knight. After giving Wu Ming a stern look, Artorias strode toward the temple complex. Seeing this, Wu Ming smiled happily. Artoria had also grown into a real queen. Actually, I have another idea. Hearing this, Artoria stopped and turned her head around. What is it? However, Wu Ming only smiled and kept her in suspense. In the other direction of the great shrine, also 5 kilometers away, the same dark purple ripple suddenly appeared. This time, it was still Wu Ming who walked out of the portal, but the people behind him were not Artoria and Guinevere, but Gudatsi and the others who were previously in the Atlas Academy. That's the great shrine of the Sun King? Gudatsi pointed excitedly. This time, they came to the right place. Senior Villo, is the Lion King not here? Is she not here yet? Matthew looked around and then looked at Wu Ming in confusion. Before this, Wu Ming said that the Lion King was coming to help them. Therefore, Matthew thought that the Lion King should have arrived a long time ago. They are indeed here, but they are not here, they are on the other side. After explaining, Wu Ming looked around to make sure that everyone had come out of the portal, then Wu Ming closed the portal. Now, let's start attacking the great shrine. Is it okay to be in such a hurry? Cursed Wrist Hassan was worried. Of course, it's okay because we are not the main attackers. Wu Ming smiled slightly. In other words, they had enough time to prepare since they were not the main attackers. However, if they did not hurry, they might not be able to make it in time. Do you mean that the Lion King is the main attacker? Hassan instantly understood. Villo, I remember you said that after Bedivere returned the Holy Sword to the Lion King lost the Holy Spear. In that case, let me break the defense of the great shrine with my noble phantasm. Arash volunteered to step forward. Forget it. The previous promise was only temporary. With me around, there's no need to sacrifice your companions. Wu Ming smiled jokingly. Then, Wu Ming seemed to feel something and was stunned. Before everyone could react, Wu Ming snapped his fingers. The portal appeared under everyone's feet, and everyone was instantly teleported away. In the next second, everyone was in the sky. It seems to be okay? Gudatsi shouted in shock, but then she realized that there seemed to be a transparent land here. This is the ground built by my spirit. Let's stay here for a while. The show is about to begin. The ground is built purely by spirit? Hassan was shocked. How strong must one's spirit be to build a ground that could withstand 8 people? It is indeed built purely by spirit. Da Vinci squatted down and studied it with interest. Da Vinci, don't mess around. If something goes wrong, we will all fall. Gudatsi swallowed her saliva. Even if it was the ground, it was transparent. Looking at this height, they would definitely become meat paste if they fell. Although Matthew was a little nervous, she was constantly adapting. Matthew even felt a little excited now. Then Matthew asked, Senior Villo, what do you mean by good show? Matthew's focus was different from others. She noticed the good show that Wu Ming mentioned. Wu Ming, who was about to answer Matthew, was stunned again, and then said, It's now. Boom. A sound like a stormy sea came from the ground to the sky where Gudatsi and the others were. Everyone looked down subconsciously. With a glance, everyone could not help but widen their eyes. It was not a stormy sea, but a real stormy sea. The water that came out of nowhere, or rather, the torrential flood that came out of nowhere was rushing toward the grand shrine at an extremely fast speed. Not only that, several attentive people, such as Matthew, Hassan, and Arash, also noticed that it was not only the desert below them that had a flood. If one looked at the grand shrine complex as the center, they would find that the torrential flood came out of nowhere in all directions around the grand shrine. And there was only one direction of the flood, which was the grand shrine complex of Ramses II. It was so similar, God's punishment. Cursed Wrist Hassan said bitterly. That was right, it was the God's punishment flood. Now, the flood seemed to be controlled by God. It completely surrounded Ramses II's grand shrine. Cursed Wrist Hassan now knew why Wu-Ming did not let them go first. It was because this was a battle that exceeded their limits. Chapter 798. On the other side, Wu-Ming led Artoria and Guinevere to stand on the ground created by his spirit power. The golden color in his eyes, which represented his sorcerer's form, had receded, and his eyes returned to their original red color. God says humans are sinful. God says the world needs to be purified. Thus, the flood is given to me. In the name of the Supreme King, I will grant the world equal relief. There was another way that Wu-Ming told Artoria, and that was to use the sixth of Wu-Ming's 12 forms, the flood. Like a divine punishment, the waves could crush everything. Half of the desert was turned into an ocean. Sand was tossed up and down in the ocean, making it look like a moving sea of sand. Guinevere was already dumbfounded by Wu-Ming's display of such a terrifying attack. I didn't expect you to still have such an ability. Artoria was impressed by Wu-Ming's ability. There was no doubt that he had reached the level of a god. The praise from Artoria, who used to be the goddess Longaminiad, was the best proof of that. This is the power of a god that I obtained after killing a god. It's one of my trump cards. Wu-Ming told Artoria the source of his power without hiding anything. I knew it was a trump card, but I didn't expect it to be one of your trump cards. Artoria was surprised. One of meant that Wu-Ming had other tricks that were comparable to this divine punishment. Villo, you're so strong. Guinevere jumped into Wu-Ming's arms happily. Guinevere was happy that the person he loved was so strong. Of course, being able to jump into Wu-Ming's arms was what Guinevere cared about the most. The veins on Artoria's face bulged again. She resisted the urge to attack and looked at the grand shrine. Is that so? But you should know that the Sun King's temple is not something that can be destroyed that easily. When the torrential flood approached the edge of the great shrine complex, it was as if it had hit an invisible wall and was unable to move an inch forward. That should be the defense mechanism of the temple. After thinking about it carefully, the manifestation of the flood was not about how much damage it could cause. It was about the wide range of impact and the ability to crush enemies caught in the flood. Therefore, it was reasonable that the flood could not break the defense of the temple. Of course, I didn't rely on this power to break the defense of the temple. Wu-Ming was right. From the beginning, he did not expect the flood to break the defense of Ramses II. As someone who also had a temple, Wu-Ming naturally knew the power of the temple. As the master of the temple, not only could he make himself invincible in the temple, but he could also attack the temple. Even if the temple was attacked from the outside, the temple was not something that could be easily broken. Combining offense and defense wasn't just for show. Lightning, lightning, lightning. I am the conqueror who can defeat 1,000 with 100, 10,000 with 1,000, and 10,000 with 10,000. Now, for me, who is standing on the side of justice, please shine brightly and bestow me with divine power. Without any hesitation, Wu-Ming quickly chanted the words, and arcs of electricity appeared on his body. Wu-Ming reached out a hand and pointed in the direction of the temple. I am the one who will crush all the enemies and hostility of humans and demons. After that, Wu-Ming clenched his fist, and the entire sea of sand turned into a sea of lightning. On the other side of the sky, Gudatsi and the others were still immersed in the stormy waves of divine punishment. As expected, Senior Villo is so strong. Matthew even had the feeling that even if he used his noble artifact, he might not be able to withstand the stormy waves. It had to be said that ever since Matthew met Wu-Ming, he always had such an illusion. Don't always think so much, you have to believe in yourself. Wu-ming suddenly rubbed Matthew's little head. As soon as Matthew spoke, Wu-ming knew what he was thinking. Not only Matthew, but Galahad's personality was also a bit like Matthew. They always thought that they could not do anything. How would they know if they did not try? I know, Senior Villo, stop rubbing my head. Matthew blushed and escaped from Wu-ming's claws. He hid behind Gudatzi and tidied up his hair that was messed up by Wu-ming. Out of kindness, Gudatzi also helped to tidy up Matthew's hair and complained to Wu-ming. Really, assassin, don't tease Matthew anymore, she's my junior. Yes, in short, don't give up easily if you haven't tried. Wu-ming perfunctorily responded to Gudatzi's complaints and then gave Wu-ming some chicken soup for the soul. Although many heroes must have told you or conveyed a similar meaning, I still have to nag. Wu-ming crossed his arms and looked straight at Matthew. Matthew, only in this way can you protect your senior in this time of danger. Matthew's heart had become a little relaxed because of his contact with too many powerful. Wu-ming had to teach him a little lesson. In fact, the most important thing was that those powerful did not endanger Matthew's senior, Gudatzi. If they did, Matthew would not relax at all. Wu-ming believed so. That was why it was a little lesson, and not a lesson that must be taught. Phew, yes, I understand, Senior Villo. Matthew took a deep breath, readjusted his state, and replied seriously. Of course, if Matthew wants to experience the power of this flood, I can spare some time to help you. Wu-ming showed a mischievous smile. Please don't. Matthew shook his head violently and gulped. No one wanted to be on the edge of danger for no reason, except for those guys who wanted to find excitement. And it just so happened that Matthew was not a guy who liked to find excitement, although looking at the flood below from a high altitude was a little exciting. I really admire you guys. You can still chat in this situation. Da Vinci, who had lost interest in the ground constructed by mental power, interjected. Hassan of all faces and cursed wrist Hassan nodded wordlessly in agreement. Quiet Hassan, on the other hand, stood on Wu-ming's side like a traitor. Ha, this is the only way to show the calmness of the strong, Arash laughed. Of course, the strong he was referring to was undoubtedly Wu-ming. By the way, these floods don't seem to have broken through the defense of the Great Shrine? Although Gudatzi was a little careless, the flood had been going on for so long, she should have noticed the situation. Ramses II's noble phantasm is both offensive and defensive. It won't be broken so easily. Da Vinci, who had been inside the Great Shrine, was the most qualified to comment. Don't worry, they have already started the next step, Wu-ming said and turned to look in the direction of the Great Shrine. Gradually, there was a slight change in the sea of sand. A large number of electric arcs continued to emerge from the sea of sand, more and more, and then it exploded instantly. Chapter 799. The electric arcs brought by the exploding thunder and lightning even touched Gudatzi and the others who were high in the sky. Standing on the ground constructed by Wu-ming's mental power, everyone could feel the electric arcs caressing their skin. What is this? Because she was an ordinary person, Gudatzi's hair stood up because of the electric arcs. He reached out and placed his hand on Gudatzi to eliminate the electric arcs on her body, then Wu-ming explained. One of the authorities I got after killing the god. How is it? Not bad, right? Wu-ming was quite satisfied with the show his original body had put on. Assassin, your authority? But you didn't do anything? Gudatzi was stunned. Are these all the handiwork of the Senior Villo? Matthew thought it was the Lion King's doing. Of course, it's my handiwork. Whether it's this godlike flood or this sudden explosion of thunder and lightning, it's all the handiwork of my original body who is with the Lion King. However, Wu-ming's words stunned everyone. You mean, you're not the real Villo in front of us now? Da Vinci asked simply. You can understand it that way, but I have a connection with my original body. At the current very close distance, all my feelings can be transmitted to my original body in real time, so now you're talking to the real me. After a brief explanation, Wu-Ming showed a surprised expression as if he had just reacted. By the way, didn't I say before that I'm not the original body? Of course not. Gudatsi and Matthew said in disdain. Even Tranquil Hassan could not help but nod. Really, are they here to fight or to play? Hassan of all faces had a headache about the current situation. I feel the same way, cursed wrist Hassan agreed. Anyway, it's all because of your teleportation portal, assassin. You sent us to the wrong place. Speaking of this, Gudatsi rolled his eyes at Wu-Ming. But didn't you guys also profit from the disaster and learn a lot from Sherlock Holmes? Wu-Ming smiled. Why does Senior Villo know so much? Matthew was puzzled by Wu-Ming's knowledge of their whereabouts. Because after you left, I had a chat with Holmes. This was why Wu-Ming came out of the sandpit at the entrance of Atlas Courtyard. I see. So, when Holmes said that someone would bring us to the great shrine of Ramses II, that person was actually you, right? Da Vinci was very sure of it through the available clues. You're right. I have to say, Holmes is indeed a detective. Just by reasoning, he guessed that I would appear in Atlas Courtyard. Wu-Ming recalled the time when he asked Sherlock Holmes, who had a face full of "You really came. Why would he be so certain that he would come?" Sherlock Holmes had said this. You can't let Tachika Fujimaru ignore you after the wrong teleportation. You must pay attention to Tachika Fujimaru. This was what Wu-Ming saw Holmes said with a smug look on his face. However, even the three-pointed Hermes could not track him. Wu-Ming did not believe that the detective was really sure just by guessing. The reason why detectives were called detectives was that they were not defined by guessing, but by clues and reasoning. In addition, Wu-Ming knew that there were other ways to determine whether a person was safe, so Wu-Ming's statement did not work. Then, under Wu-Ming's threat of force, Holmes told the truth. There is a problem with the command incantation on the back of Tachika Fujimaru's hand. There was no doubt that Wu-Ming had discovered the special command incantation on the back of Gudatsi's hand. Look, the defense of the great shrine is broken. Arash, who had been paying attention to the defense of the great shrine, suddenly spoke. Arash's shout pulled Wu-Ming back to reality from his memories. Then, Wu-Ming followed everyone's gaze. The monstrous waves that were originally blocked by the invisible wall, now with the help of thunder and lightning, successfully broke through the invisible defensive wall. The sea of sand mixed with thunder and lightning instantly rushed into the shrine complex, swallowing countless shrines until they were crushed. Assassin, will the people here be okay? With Wu-Ming's violent means, Gudatsi was worried about the Egyptian people who lived between the shrines. When the Sun King descended, he moved the territory under his rule, which meant that not only the shrines, but also the Egyptian people ruled by Ramses II moved here. When Gudatsi and the others came to look for the Sun King, they had a brief interaction with the Egyptian people here. The Egyptian people also helped to move the food and water they obtained from the Sun King into the car built by Da Vinci. Is that so? When you came, were there any ordinary people here? Wu-Ming pondered and began to recall. Assassin, don't tell me you don't know that there are ordinary people here? Gudatsi was shocked. However, Wu-Ming shook his head regretfully. I can only tell you that whether it was before I came to look for the Sun King or now, I didn't find any traces of ordinary people here. After Gudatsi and the others left the desert, when Wu-Ming came to talk to the Sun King, Wu-Ming didn't find any traces of Egyptian people here, not even traces of life. Wu-Ming, who had never seen an Egyptian person, originally thought that Ramses II didn't have any of his people here. However, now that Gudatsi and the others said so, Wu-Ming realized that the ordinary people must have disappeared after Gudatsi and the others left and before Wu-Ming came to look for the Sun King. If Wu-Ming knew this earlier, he would have discovered that something was wrong with Ramses II. However, this was also Wuming's fault. After all, an Egyptian pharaoh who always talked about the king of all kings, how could there be no Egyptian people in his territory? How could? Matthew froze for a moment. That's impossible. There were a lot of people when we came. Gudatsi also began to worry. Gudatsi and the others didn't suspect Wuming, they were simply worried about the missing Egyptian people. At this time, Da Vinci spoke. I'm afraid it's the work of the unknown enemy this time. As the person who came here with Gudatsi and Matthew, Da Vinci had the most right to speak. If the current unknown enemy is the same as what the Villo told us, then it's not surprising that there are no ordinary people here. Why? Gudatsi expressed that she was stupid. If the other party is really King Solomon's people, then it's their duty to come here and clean up the humans. The reason why the Sun King cooperated with the Lion King and attacked the people of the mountains was to clean up the last place where there were a lot of humans in this singularity. Since the other party wanted to clean up the humans, it was normal to clean up the humans in front of them first. How could? Matthew's face was full of disbelief. Did that mean that the warm-hearted Egyptian people who helped them carry food and water had been killed? However, things may not be as bad as you think. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.